Good morning. I would like to call the Monday, September 11th Board of Zoning Adjustments meeting to order. We'll begin with roll call. Candace Forrest is absent. Todd James. Tamara Agins. Present. Jose Alvarez.
Present.
Ramiro Diaz.
Present.
Alfonso Gonzalez.
Present.
At this time, would the board make a motion to adopt the minutes from the August 7th meeting? So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the rules from last month's meeting. Since Granicus is, since the vote cast is down, we're going to be doing verbal vote today. So, roll call vote. Board Member Gonzalez.
Yay.
Board Member Agins.
Yay.
Yay, Zach.
And Romero.
Yay.
And a yay for me. And that motion is passed.
As a reminder to applicants, action that the board takes today will be released in the form of a disposition notice by September 21st and sent via email and mail to the applicant, as well as posted on the One Stop app for other interested parties. Requests that the board votes to approve must show compliance with any noted provisos before the case is finalized and granted final approval. 2 items on today's agenda have been withdrawn. Item number 2, BZA docket 027-23 for the property at 2426, 2428 Murray Street. Item 3, BZA docket 033-23 for the property at 859, 861 Navarre Street. 1 item on today's agenda has been rendered moot. Item number 21, BZA docket 085-23 for the property at 1533 Broadway Street and 7110 Birch Street. The applicant for BZA 040-23 has requested a 60-day deferral. Will the board consider a motion to take this item out of order?
All right, we have a request from staff to hear things out of order.
I like to make the motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Mr. Gonzalez.
Yay.
Again.
Yay.
Yay.
Alvarez. Yay. And yay. That motion is passed.
We will now begin with unfinished business for safety and permits decision appeals. Will the vice chair please read the hearing rules for decision appeals?
Rules and procedures for the appeals of the decisions of the Director of Department of Safety and Permits. The following procedures shall be observed during the appeal hearing. Each speaker will give their name and address prior to speaking on the proposal. The representative of the Department of Safety and Permits shall present to the board the decision which is under appeal, the relevant code sections related to the appeal, and any information explaining the department's decision. The applicant or representative will speak next. The presentation shall be limited to a maximum of 5 minutes for each applicant or representative speaker, but in no event shall the cumulative presentation total by the applicant or their representatives exceed 15 minutes. Proponents or persons in favor of the proposal will speak next and be allowed 3 minutes per speaker. Opponents or persons in opposition to the proposal will speak next and be allowed 3 minutes per speaker as well. The applicant or representative will be allowed a rebuttal. The rebuttal shall be limited to a cumulative maximum of 5 minutes. Additional information. For any exceptional case, the time limitations may be extended by the presiding officer with the approval of the board as the board deems necessary. The case may be acted upon at this meeting or deferred for additional information or review. If the case is deferred, it will be acted upon at the subsequent meeting as required by law. All proper parliamentary procedures shall be followed, including recognition of speakers, relevance of argument, and absolute prohibition of applause or demonstration. The standard of review. The Board of Zoning Adjustments has the power to hear and decide appeals where it is alleged that there's an error in any order, requirement, decision, or determination made by any administrative officer in the enforcement of the comprehensive zoning ordinance. The board also has the power to hear and determine appeals for applicants who have been refused a building permit because of a violation or conflict with the zoning ordinance or the official maps of the city. The applicant's appeal of the Board of Zoning Adjustments is governed by section 5-408 of the City of New Orleans Home Rule Charter.
Item 8, docket number 040-23.
It's the understanding of the Department of Safety and Permits that the applicant has requested a deferral of 60 days on this item. The department has no objection to that request. If the board would like, we'd be happy to read our summary report into the record, but we'll only do so if the board believes it's necessary.
Okay. So I think just to follow traditional procedure, I think at least just, let's see if anyone's here to speak on this one. So if the applicant is present for BZA docket number 040-23.
Laura Curl on behalf of the homeowners.
Could speak to the mic, please, if
Oh.
you don't mind. The mic's in front of you. If you could
Right.
speak closer to the mic.
Laura Curl on behalf of the homeowners at 2842 Coliseum. We're just here and we have no objection to the deferral.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else here to speak in support of this request? Seeing or hearing none, is anyone here to speak in opposition to the request? Okay, seeing and hearing none on that point. I think at this time, I don't know if it's necessary, if we need to necessarily read the report in, if there's already an agreement with both parties related to a 60-day deferral. Any questions from the board? Excuse me. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll go. In regards to docket 0423, is that right? 040. I move to defer for 60 days per the applicant's request.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor for a 60-day deferral. Roll call vote, Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yay.
Commissioner Eggins.
Yes.
And that's a yay for me, so that motion passes for the 60-day deferral. Back to the regular agenda.
We will begin with the unfinished business for variances. Will the vice chair please read the hearing rules for variances?
All right, so back to the rules and procedures for public hearings for variance requests. The following procedures shall be observed during the hearing. Each speaker shall give their name and address prior to speaking on the proposal. The applicant or representative will speak first. The presentation shall be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes for each applicant or representative speaker, but in no event shall the cumulative presentation totaled by applicants or their representatives exceed 10 minutes. Proponents or persons in favor of the proposal will speak next and be allowed 2 minutes per speaker. Opponents or persons in opposition of this proposal will speak next and be allowed 2 minutes per speaker as well. And the applicant or representative will be allowed a rebuttal. The rebuttal will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. Additional information: for any exceptional case, the time limitation may be extended by the presiding officer with the approval of the board. As the board deems necessary, the case may be acted upon at this meeting or deferred for additional information or review. If the case is deferred, it will be acted upon at a subsequent meeting as provided by law. All proper parliamentary procedures shall be followed, including recognition of speakers, relevance of argument, and absolute prohibition of applause or demonstration. Standards for review. The Board of Zoning Adjustments shall not authorize a variance for requirements of the comprehensive zoning ordinance unless it finds, based on the evidence presented to it, that each case has satisfied the 9 criteria as listed in Article 4, Section 4.6.f of the comprehensive zoning ordinance.
Item 1, docket 004-23.
BZA docket 004-23 is a request for a variance from the provisions of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1, Table 11-2A of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit the construction of a single-family resident with insufficient rear yard setback. Okay, we're back to this one. I know this one has been on there a few times, but we have made some, I would consider significant progress with this one. It's going down from a request of 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 or 6 waivers down to 1, which is the insufficient rear yard setback. The only thing we haven't been able to determine, because we haven't received their elevations, so we haven't been able to make a decision about that one yet, but Emily has spoken with them at this point about their need to provide this information. She did call and have a conversation with them. So we're just waiting.
Got
Or we recommend a 30-day deferral.
All right, thank you for that summary. Is the applicant present for BZA number 004-23? Anyone here to speak in support of this request? Anyone here to speak in opposition?
Morning. I'm Dan Casey. I live at 7801 Pearl Street, which is directly across the street from this 7808 proposal. I do have a couple of comments, or some questions actually too. The biggest issue with us right now is that there's no current plan on record for the neighbors to look at. So how do we talk about the orientation of the house or the planning or the side yard or the rear yard, since we can't find any plans? I couldn't locate them today on the one-stop site that shows the current building plans. So I'm really not clear, especially the rear proposal part of the building thing, which relates to the variance about the rear yard going from 15 feet all the way down to like 3 feet. Also, without the plans, it's hard to review anything about curb cuts or driveways or height of the primary building or the secondary buildings, or even if they're going to want to cut down more trees. There's also a servitude with the property next to it on Burdette Street. And so there's actually 11 of us who live on the street, who own a house on the street, live on the street, and are opposed to what they're have been talking about for like 2 years, but it's, I guess, officially on your docket, like 258 days or something like that. So there's been numerous requests, and they used to lay the proposals on the hood of their car and show everybody, but not anymore. We're really not opposed to the Berkeys themselves, if they would just propose to build something that was within the codes for the historic district of Carrollton in our neighborhood. So, but the first and the biggest problem we have right now is we can't find any plans to look at. And to be honest with you, the plans over the last 2 years, I've personally seen at least 4 or 5 different plans. It seems like it changes all the time. Any questions?
Well, we'll wait. If we have any questions for you, it'll be yeah, sorry about that. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this request? Okay, and understanding that the applicant isn't present, there's an opportunity. Usually it's the time for them to rebut, but no one's here to speak.
Can I speak to that though, what he just said?
Yeah, because I was actually going to address some point,
Okay.
but go ahead.
That is a valid fact. They, even within the submission period, I mean, within the application period, even before, and you said 2 years, but with the 254 days that it's been pending with us, there have been numerous different versions of the the plan submitted. So we've uploaded, previously I had been uploading the original version that they had supplied, but on this last go round, we uploaded every version of the plans that they had given us, with the most recent being the one that was at the forefront of the packet.
Okay, so Mr. Casey, so probably what may work best in this case, after we hear this item, because there's already a request for a deferral on this, because currently the application is incomplete, or at least in order for us to hear it at this time, I may direct, if you wouldn't mind, just directing Mr. Casey to where he may be able to see the BZA report as opposed to, I think he's been looking on the one-stop shop, and I'm not sure if it's correctly referencing the actual BZA report there. Usually it's a separate set of documents that would be posted on that
One
site.
of my neighbors, Michelle McCarthy, who lives on the street, I think they have her email because she's the one who typically writes back and forth
Gotcha.
for years.
So what I'm just saying is that this is easier for you to just know where to go.
Right.
So that you could get access to the
Yeah.
drawing so you can see what has been presented.
I was just saying, if they sent the note to Miss McCarthy,
I'll send it to her. I'm familiar with her. I speak to her a lot. I'll send her the newest
All right.
report.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, hearing that there was no other opposition, any questions from the board? What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, for motions in order. In regards to BZA docket. Right. BZA, yeah, 004-23, I move for a 30-day deferral, per the request of the staff recommendation.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor for BZA docket number 004-23 for a 30-day deferral at the request of staff. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yay.
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
and Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
And yes for me, and that motion is passed for that 30-day deferral. Next item.
Item two, BZA docket 027-23 for the property at 2426, 2428 Murray Street was withdrawn. Item three, BZA docket 033-23 for the property at 859, 861 Navarre Street was withdrawn. Item four, docket number 052-23.
Me again, I'm coming. I'm sorry, BZA 05223 is a request for variances from the provisions of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1, Table 11.28 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit the construction of a single-family residence with insufficient front yard setback, insufficient front yard build-to line, insufficient interior side yard setback, and insufficient rear yard setback. And we had come together, and we had heard this one about 2 months ago. I think it was in July. It was a very irregularly shaped property, and it was a suggestion of the board that we go out and do a little research, I guess, to try to figure out how this property came to be in this very unique shape. And I've spoken with Frisia and myself. We've gone through records in real estate, land records. We weren't able to find anything on how this particular sliver of property came to be. Either one of us, I had gotten something from Zach Smith's office. They weren't able to find anything either. So as of today, the board, staff has the same position of denial.
Thank you. Is the applicant present for BZA docket number 052-23?
Yes, good morning, board. Zach Smith, on behalf of Zach Smith Consulting, 530 South Norman C. Francis. I really appreciate the time from the staff on this one. I think worked with my team to try and uncover any documents to kind of bring the board back and refresh. There's a couple of things. There's a front yard setback, which the discussion 2 months ago was pretty open and supportive to. There's a rear yard discussion, which this group was pretty open and supportive to. And then there were issues with the side yards, where essentially we're asking for that 1 foot waiver on each side, instead of providing the 3 foot setback, only providing essentially a hair over 2 feet. One of the big sticking points from this group was it wanted some sort of proof or verification that there was nothing in any sort of file that would have preempted or eliminated, prohibited any sort of future construction when that lot was made. So I really appreciate the city staff going through this with a fine-tooth comb. We've gone through it through all the publicly accessible records. And to date, there's nothing that either group has been able to find that says that this lot was prohibited from any sort of future development. So with that said, we're trying to push forward with the original request. There was another request that came through, which was, can you potentially look at thinning this thing up and what that looks like? And the original kind of proposed design there went to where this became a 3-story structure. The property, as you know, is already much smaller than a typical building would be allowed if it was a more traditional property. And so the property owner said if they can't, due to making this thing actually, to where it's feasible for square footages and whatnot to make sense, that they would opt to go up to a permitted 3rd floor. And of course, we know per our discussion that bringing this up to a 3rd floor, even at a 3-foot setback, would be more, in my opinion, much more detrimental to sunlight and to shadows and things of that nature versus a 1-foot setback. I do want to bring it to the board's attention. There was a project last month that was discussed, and I do believe, like all issues, the circumstances of each can always be a little bit differently. But there was a property, it was a little bit thinner. Remember, this is only 16 feet wide as a lot. There was a property at 2711 North Durgeon, which was staff recommended approval and was approved by this board. We feel we're extremely similar in nature. And there's also a project specifically that this project was based on at 4621 Chestnut. And so we would appreciate the approval of this project, as we've done the homework that was requested of this group. We've been unable to find anything that would specifically spell out any sort of prohibition. And we do believe the 1-foot waiver on each side is par for the course when we have right now a 16-foot width. When we add in wall dimensions, wall widths, etc., you're talking about 8 feet of actual open space, wall to interior wall to make this thing work, which gets just a hair too thin. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in support of this request? Anyone here to speak in opposition? We just received a speaker call on us.
Sorry, I had car trouble.
No,
I'm Mary Mize in Gubala. I'm representing myself and also Mid-City Neighborhood Organization. MCNO is strongly opposed to the variances requested for the development at 3718 Barden Street. These variances would allow the construction of a residence on a lot with insufficient front yard setback, insufficient interior side yard setback, insufficient rear yard setback, and insufficient front yard built to line. This appears to be a driveway, as you can see, albeit an unkept one. Please use, well, I had sent you all earlier some photos of additional shots of the driveway. In the opinion of many, repeated allowances like this jeopardize the safety and well-being of mid-city residents, creating hazardous conditions such as a greater potential for storm damage and fire. They also make maintenance of adjacent properties virtually impossible. Please stop granting these variances and prioritize the security and health of our residents. It really is an inappropriate building for this location. It basically is a driveway that they're trying to put a house on. And if you look at the sides, you'd see that the building would just butt up against the awnings of the neighboring house to the right and butt up against the, I guess it's the HVAC units over to the house to the left. And it would just be a massive problem. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry I was a little late.
It's okay, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to PCA docket number 052-23? Okay, the applicant has the opportunity to rebut.
Thank you again, board. Just to kind of further spell out that hardship, and we would talk about potentially being constrained a little bit more to where it forces this building to go up 3 feet. You're talking about potentially having a 10-foot wide base with a 35-foot tall to the midpoint of the roof height, which again, we know, in my opinion, would be much more of an impact for folks next door with a 3-story building next to them. But we also know just the engineering hardship that puts on this project if you're going to have a building with that thin of a base at that tall. Reminding as well, just to make sure that in the event the side yard is not something that this group can get to, the front yard and the rear yards for how short this property is as well. Again, it's only 73 feet deep, is something to also consider. I know we essentially blanked out with any of the recommendations from the staff. But I do believe that if the side yards are still just a little too much for you guys, that the front yards and the rear yards should be granted, as it's impossible to build anything on this. And remembering, I can appreciate the points of the neighborhood and the neighborhood group. They'd prefer it to be a driveway. Again, we've now proven that there is no prohibition against building, and it would be a fundamental hardship to deny somebody the ability to build a structure on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? So just real quick, Mr. Smith, I do remember this from 2 months ago, and while I do appreciate what the intent is in terms of we've already been able to, and you've actually been able to demonstrate in your presentation that some form of a structure can be put on a property, but it's what you're basing it on is the narrowness of what that actual proposed structure would be, which would be 10 feet as opposed to 12.
Correct. It'd be 10 feet outside of the building, to where it essentially becomes a non-starter to actually build something that's going to work as a, for egress. When we talk about doubling up that stair the way that it is and having, 3 feet in width for proper access for egress, you essentially can't get, a switchback stair to work for 3 feet, 3 feet, 3 feet with all the widths of the walls. And then again, from an engineering standpoint, having the incredible engineering feat to get a modern house to go at 10 foot wide to go up 35 feet tall, we know is not necessarily an outcome that I think anybody wants to see. So, do I think it's possible to potentially shrink this thing in? We know that you can't have a house without the front yard and the rear yard setbacks. So again, the discussion from 60 plus days ago was pretty open to seeing the absolute hardship. It was essentially just down to those side yards.
Has any consideration on plan been taken into effect on how to potentially mitigate the setback condition on the South Cortez side of the property as opposed to South Telemachus? And reason why I'm asking that question, the structure as it's currently configured on the Telemachus Street side faces rear yards as opposed to facing side yards on the side yard on the Cortez side of this plan, which does have a series of windows apparently up against one residential unit.
So that just, for what it's worth, that discussion came up about windows and things from some neighbors, some close proximity for existing buildings that are a little too close to the property line, and some overhangs and awnings. Overall, right now, I don't want to BS and say that there's been this just absolute study of how this potential facade would treat every single side. This is one of those situations of, if the side yard setback waivers were in fact granted, for fire purposes, they'd have to stay blank walls. If they're not granted, then fenestration and whatnot could be entered. But a typical lot again would be 120. This is 73. So how it interacts with somebody's backyard or side yard, a typical, normal, expected is this entire buildable area, the whole 73 by 16 would typically be something that would be the side of a house for just about every development. So I don't believe there's been a special review of how this building interacts as somebody's backyard versus their side yard. I don't believe so.
So the reason why I asked that question is getting into criteria 9 on it. I believe that's criteria 9 on a detrimental air and light. So considering that at least creates a setback condition that would at least probably alleviate some of the other concerns that we have with the property, because I think there's a series of awnings on the property next door that if the structure was to go in place, that may require them to deal with some of the, because of if I also understand from the images, it's a series of window units on that side of that building as well.
And we're respectful of that. At the same time, I think there has been an undue amount of deference placed by staff for what some of those existing conditions are, which in a modern way, the awning, projecting across is something that is more of a property rights situation. And I believe there was a potential complaint, or there was an airing of this may be an issue where for what the real reality of this is, those things should be removed. With that said,
Is it the same property owner?
what? Same property owner next door
Mm-hmm.
as this property? No,
The one, well, that's right. Wasn't this this property was sold?
this
correct?
property was sold. This
Was
property was
sold.
sold as blight, as I believe it was transferred in 1819 as a sheriff's auction. Kind of bought the taxes and he's moved forward.
Okay.
And then to that point, that number 9 criteria as well, again, if this were to shrink in, we would imagine this shrinking in 11.5 inches, because essentially that's what the waiver is on each side. And this were to go up a 3rd floor, do we believe that that's going to be more beneficial or less beneficial to folks, air and light? If you were to have a building that's about 50% taller next to that property, is the 1 foot setback versus the 10, 15 feet of addition, which is the potentially the least intrusive? I believe the setback in mandating this height not being allowed. I'd love to see a proviso that the height cannot exceed that they would be stripped of their abilities to in the future build on to maintain some of that setback.
So you're saying a deed restriction on height if it was approved?
And would be 100% for that, and as well as a proviso from this group granting it, knowing that the ninth criteria is important and that this is the way to offset that. Because again, your eyes and your brains are gonna picture this as a 3-story building right there, just 11.5 inches further set off to be compliant for their side yard. And the 3-story structure would be, we just know to be more egregious.
Any other questions from the board?
Do you happen to know the setback of the neighboring properties from the street? Because they seem to be further back. I was just curious what
I believe we have, you're talking about for the front yards?
yeah. Well, because they've got the steps on the front that go up to the second floor. I was just curious where the one at the corner seems to be closer
Mhm.
to the street, and then the other one set back. I just was trying to visualize it. I'm not seeing.
I don't have it in front of me, but I know that we've studied that.
Just based on that survey that was provided to us, the only thing that's showing up is the 2 AC units that's in the rear of those properties. Yeah, it's up against the fence line, but based on this, it is really hard to tell. How far, well, it's weird because it's referencing 1.5 feet setback from the property line for that fence, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily 1.5 feet clear to that fence line to the edge of the structure, or is it just 1.5 feet into the property? Because even with actually, there's even like a 0.2 reference, but I'm not clear if that's the building versus property line.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at where the neighboring building is relative to this property line and
Right.
their windows, and then also how far they are set back from the street, because they're pretty far back, but then the one on the corner is closer, so it doesn't, the front yard set, I think I'm talking about the front yard setback. It doesn't seem to me to be too out of alignment with the street edge is what I'm thinking about, but I can't tell because there isn't a drawing of it.
And I think we asked for additional drawings on this one last time as well, too, because all we had was the front elevation and the plan.
Yeah. I was just trying to get the easier ones. The front yard setback seems to be
Right.
more, but I can't understand it from what we have.
I know that the neighbor raised a hand, but just from a point of rules and procedures, traditionally, I mean, unless you have something to add in context to the particular question right now.
Sorry, I don't know the rules of parliament, but at the last BZA meeting, what had come up at the end was that you all were going to research something that I had been told, that this lot was originally a driveway for the house on Telemachus. And you were going to look and see if there were any, I forget how you phrased it. Sorry,
Correct.
Uh,
So just to address that, and I think it was when you were coming in, staff actually took the time to explain to us that they did the research going to real estate and records, as well as in Mr. Smith's office to research how the lot may have come into formation in order to understand the history of how this came to be. So that was taken into consideration. No one was able to uproot any information or provide further clarity in terms of how this came to be.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Sorry, any further questions from the board?
I think I just wanted to echo your concern about the setback on once it just being the same on both sides. I have I have less consternation about it on the backyard property side than on
Yeah,
the
on the Telemarket side.
sort of the alley side or the sort of shared space with the neighbors and looking at the pattern of the street and how the shotgun houses that are in the middle of the block are spaced.
And to your point earlier on 3-story versus 2, if the structure is allowed to go up to 3 stories, I don't really feel comfortable saying that it would impact detrimental air and light if it's allowed by right. Okay, that's the first part. Second piece, it is more about the setback condition between the 2 adjacent structures when we get into that conversation, because it's to allow light to continue through that, but also the ability to service those properties. So if we get into a 2-foot setback, we're ultimately ending up with like a 3.5-foot setback between these 2 buildings, which essentially becomes a service alley to both properties. So just trying to see if there's any difference to change how that may apply on this end. Because if I understand correctly, just from a building code standpoint, no matter where that wall is built, it's still going to end up needing to be a rated wall because of the distance between the 2 structures. So we're not providing the opportunity to add additional windows or anything on the proposed building.
If I may, since the point of concern is more directed to one side, again, for what it's worth, we've been a little closed-minded on this, looking at it on having to be strict on both sides. So it's definitely going to be a huge win to have a waiver granted on one and potentially denied on the other than a denial on both. So for what it's worth, if it makes it a little simpler, and you're concerned about specific issues on one edge, I don't think that's something that we're gonna fight too hard on.
Right. And just to provide clarity, I think from when we asked that question 2 months ago, at least from when I phrased that question before about trying to understand the history of the formation of the lot, I didn't want to see a situation where this lot was basically created from a different type of use and trying to see, all right, well, basically this was done for someone's benefit. Then of course it falls out of commerce and then goes to auction. And now someone's trying to utilize it. But once that transaction process begins, especially through the auction side of the coin, as opposed to this being forced to be in use with a different property, it makes it a lot harder for us to try to remove the ability to use the property, especially if there's ways to put a structure in place that still adheres to the building codes. Any other questions from the board? It's a pleasure to board. Yeah, all right, well, since we're kind of quiet on this one. Yeah, just a question to staff. If they were to come back with some form of a modification on plan, which may address one setback versus the other, would you need more time to still look at that as a proposed plan at first? To consider that as a alternative?
I mean, the thing that takes the most time is the data gathering, and that's already there.
Right,
So if they provided a new plan, I mean, we could do a reanalysis of the 9 criteria before the next meeting. I mean, it depends on how fast
how expediently.
they got it to us, but that's possible, is it?
Yeah, and I would really appreciate a plan showing the building in context, because it's just right now drawn on a sheet with, funky title block.
Yeah, so I think that comes back to what we asked for 2 months ago. I think that we asked for additional drawings on this site. So I know that they're trying to avoid spending the money doing it, but if we really want to get through this process, we need to have proper documentation of the plan. So more is, in this case, so more is less, and would you look for a 30 or 60-day deferral?
For this, I look at the 50-day, just knowing that we're already on the 11th,
60,
but, well, 60-day, but
yeah.
just knowing the turnaround and the public cutoffs and all that. I
Got
think
it.
It's gonna put if it was the first Monday in September, it's,
And I think that's what the neighbor was referring to. I think that's actually the drive where it was a driveway to that property, which is the one that's to the rear, which is the proposed rear yard setback for this one.
Yeah, looking at the Sanborn maps, it was and I'm sorry, I'm not drawing the terminology, but not a compound driveway, but when you can park one car.
The rear yard.
Yeah,
So
and
it
park the
was
other.
the alley access to that rear yard. But this was clearly broken up off of the other three parcels at some period of time. But if y'all weren't able to determine when that came into formation.
It was definitely after 94, but at what point?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable right now making any kind of determination without seeing the building in relation on a measured drawing, because I'm looking at Sanborn maps and aerials and it's too
Yeah,
hard to
we
see.
need better documentation. All right, what's the pleasure of the board?
In regards to docket 5223, I move to defer for 60 days. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor for BZA docket number 052-23 for a 2-month deferral to give the applicant time to provide further documentation. Roll call vote, Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yay.
Commissioner Alvarez,
Yay.
Commissioner Egan,
Yes.
and Commissioner James is a yes. That motion passed.
Item 5, docket number 060-23.
BZA 060-23 is a request for a variance from the provisions of Article 22, Section 22.4.8, Table 22-1 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit the construction of a single-family resident with insufficient off-street parking. The site in question is located in Central City with frontage on South Russia-Blade Street. Lot A, an interior parcel, is rectangular in shape, measuring approximately 30.2 feet in width, 59 feet in depth, and 1,789 square feet in area. The lot is currently vacant. An analyzation of the criteria, staff came to the conclusion that this application does not meet the criteria number 6. The subject lot is an interior lot with the measurements that we're giving. The HURD2 district allows properties to be developed up to 35 feet in height. Therefore, the applicant has the option to add a second story to provide the number of bedrooms desired or provide parking on the ground level of the structure, as there are many examples of properties throughout New Orleans developed in this manner. While the lot depth and area dimensions of the lot are substandard, the applicant does have options, and therefore the staff does not believe that the hardship is demonstrated. Based on this report, the staff believes that the requested variance fails to meet criteria 6 of the standards of variance and is recommending denial.
Is the applicant present for BZA docket number 060-23?
Good morning. My name is Katasha Taylor. I'm the owner of 2712 South Russia Blade Street. From my understanding, they want me to go up on the lot because of the off-street parking, correct? Okay, that is at the moment, that's very costly, and I'm trying to get affordable housing in that area. And also on that street, no one has off-street parking. So that's the reason why I'm trying to stay within a budget to build a home. That's all I really got.
Just give us 1 second. Anybody else here to speak in support of this request? Anyone here to speak in opposition? Okay, hearing none. Just one point, I want to make sure we're just try to help to restructure this a little bit. One of the rules is that if you weigh cost is your justification, we're actually not supposed to follow that as a reasoning to grant the request. But if you want to take time to understand question number 6, which is the last remaining criteria that I believe staff said was not properly addressed, is will a strict adherence to the property result in demonstrable hardship upon the owner or distinguished from or this is purely for your inconvenience. So I think if we could maybe speak more to that and what you were speaking to in terms of what's occurring along this right of way. So just want to make sure we understand if you weigh cost as your reasoning, that's actually giving us the justification
reason.
to deny it, okay?
Okay.
So guess I'm being nice today, huh? What happens when I lose my voice? Do you want to maybe still address that question as opposed to cost?
As far as it being a hardship,
Yes.
yes, yeah. Well, I mean, it'll be a what, as far as how it would be a hardship?
So I think what they're suggesting right now is just based on that last criteria. It's you could come up with a different plan which would allow for the off-street parking stall. But if I understood correctly from what you just mentioned, the lion's share of the properties along this street do not have off-street parking.
No, there's no off-street parking along the line share. Even with the apartment complex that's next to it, there's no parking for them either. So,
Okay, go ahead.
Because I have a question for staff. So it's a pretty shallow lot, right? It's only 60 feet deep. Is that right?
60 by, what, 30 by 59?
Yeah, he's asking a question to staff.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I'm
it's
sorry.
30 by 60, and then so that just to confirm, so that's a pretty shallow depth, so that really pushes the development kind of footprint. The other question I had is where does the zoning change to not require park? Because I know in historic districts, a lot of historic districts, you're not required to have a parking space. I was just curious, where is that line?
That's a good question.
I don't know what's, because I mean, I know in my neighborhood, you're
I
not
can
required.
pull up
to-
the property viewer, but unless you know offhand, let me pull up property viewer.
Yeah, I was going to chime in. There are houses in the next block that have off-street parking. I know the area well. And it's not to go against your request. I'm rooting for you because this area needs new affordable housing. It's a prime area for it. You're also across the street from the old Durham Middle School site owned by the school board. That's a huge vacant lot. There's a tremendous amount of all that cars could be lined. You could get 50 cars along Rocher Blade right in the next block. So, I'm not trying to discourage you in any way. I'm rooting for you, but we would need to hear about how you developing the lot with this waiver is a demonstrable hardship for you. So if you want to think about it for a minute and we need some meat on the bone to.
Okay, that's fine. Let me think about it. All right.
But I think actually just. But you're saying that stretch does not have, it's an undeveloped block?
The very on the other side of the street to the left where that green grass is cut, is a former OCSI middle school site. Yeah, it's
So-
Durham Middle.
And so taking what you just mentioned, there is a ton of on-street parking available.
Tremendous,
So
tremendous.
allowing for the street parking to exist along this stretch actually would not create a problem in that area because there's an abundance of parking available.
Absolutely. Okay.
And I just looked into what you had said, or what you had asked. And it's the historic core that's exempt from parking, but it's HUB1 as well. If it, please, Emily, if I say anything incorrect, please correct me. But it appears to be HUB1 as well, and she's literally one property from HUB1. It's like HUB1 stops here, and the side of her house is on the HUB1 line. Or HUB1, what is it? Yeah.
I guess you have to put the line somewhere, huh? Gee whiz.
And if I could also jump in, there are parking exemptions available for HURD2. However, it applies to lots that are 30 feet or less in width. This one is just over 30 feet in width, so it doesn't apply. And in addition, for single and two family developments, we calculate whether at least 40% of the other single and two family developments on a block face provide off-street parking. And if they don't, then this property would be exempt. The issue is there are no other single or two family developments on this block face.
Goes to the argument of building new construction affordable homes on that block face. That I gotta make it fun, right?
No. So any other questions from the board? It's the pleasure of the board.
A quick question to staff, just crossing T's and dotting I's over here. Would this if we were to move forward with granting the variance, I'm looking for the standard provide, would it just be the three standard provisos that go along with it? Or four? Anybody? And that's for staff.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I think earlier in the report, a couple months ago, we had recommended the standard 3. However, we are trying to simplify the provisos a little bit. And so at this point, staff would recommend a proviso just for the applicant to submit a revised site plan showing the conditions, and that would be the plan that we stamp off on for final approval.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Oh, Emily, what was the 40% thing? I'm looking at the block now. I didn't know that. The 40% on the block face, what was that?
So in Article 22, in historic urban neighborhoods, where there are 40% of existing single and two family dwellings on a block face, where those have been developed with no off-street parking, then the new proposed single or two family would also be exempt.
I can go down there. I mean, we've done everything, everything we've looked at is from March 2022. I can go down there and kind of do more of a on the ground and see if anything has been developed since what we have access to.
it hasn't.
Okay.
Before you make that assumption.
Staff has the llama permitting history, and
Oh.
there are no new building permits for that block face.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if there's a motion
Yeah, for motions in order.
in regards to BZA docket 060-20 on further conversations today, specifically addressing the 6 criteria and understanding the conditions of the wider area where the proposed variance would be granted. I'm going to move for approval of the variance, citing that the applicant has met all of the criteria for Article 22, Section 22.4.a, off-street vehicle parking requirements. With the one noted proviso mentioned by staff that the applicant submit an updated site plan for them to stamp, give a stamp of approval for.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor to as requested for BZA docket number 060-23. And that motion is to approve the waiver of Article 22, Section 22.4A, Table 22-1 for off-street vehicle parking requirements. Understanding that the 9 criteria have been met based on what we have in the staff report, and addressing the last criteria 6 as spoke upon by Commissioner Gonzalez with the one noted proviso. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yay.
Commissioner Eggins,
Yes.
Commissioner Alvarez,
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
and Commissioner James is a yes. That motion is passed. Thank you.
Item 6, docket number 068-23 for the property at 5936 Louisville Street. The applicant has submitted a request this morning to defer this item for 30 days to give them more time to prepare their argument for the board.
Okay, is the representative present for BZA docket number 068-23? Anyone here to speak in opposition to this request? And seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, if the motion is in order.
Please.
Regarding docket BZA 068-23, I move to defer the matter for 30 days per the applicant request. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor for a 30-day deferral at the request of staff. Roll call vote, Commissioner Alvarez, Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yay.
Commissioner Eggins,
Yes.
and Commissioner James is a yes, and that motion passed. Next item.
Item 7, docket number 069-23.
BZA 06923 is for a property located at 1423 General Pershing Street. The request is for variance from provisions of Article 11, Section 11.3A1, Table 11-2, Article 21, Section 21.6A8, Article 21, Section 21.6H2, Article 21, Section 21.6H3, Article 21, Section 21.6H4, and Article 21, Section 21.6H5 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit retention of a carport with insufficient distance from the rear lot line, insufficient distance from the interior side lot line, excessive height enclosed on the corner side yard, resulting in insufficient permeable open space after the fact. At the August 7th meeting, the board deferred this matter to allow staff adequate time to review the requests. During this time, staff found that the after the fact request failed to meet 9 of the 9 review criteria. The applicant is seeking the stated variances to retain a rear yard carport that measures approximately 11 feet, 6 inches wide, 29 feet in length, and 16 feet in height on the corner property. The applicant's stated intent of the carport is a desire to protect mounted mechanical equipment. Per the construction of the carport, the applicant has also reduced the site's permeability to approximately 5.7% of the required 30% in the HURM1 historic urban multifamily residential district. In reviewing the subject site and surrounding area, neither the length nor narrowness of the lot restricts the development of the site or the carport's compliance. Similarly, staff found that the applicant provided width, length, and height of the carport is not necessary to protect the wall-mounted components as indicated by the applicant. Based on this report, staff believes that the requested variances for Article 11, Section 11.3A, Table 2, minimum permeable open space, Article 21, Section 21.6A8, accessory structures and uses for corner lots, Article 21, Section 21.6H2, carport location, Article 21, Section 21.6H3, carport projection, Article 21, Section 21.6H4, carport height, and Article 21, Section 21.6H5, carport interior or corner side yard, fails to meet 9 of the 9 criteria of the standards for variance for Article 4, Section 4.4 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. Therefore, staff recommends denial of the requested variances.
Is the applicant or their representative present for BZA docket number 069-23? Name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Charles Ocello, 1423 General Pershing Street. Okay, we'll start with 11.3A.1, minimal permeable space. In the submittal, I noted that the entire backyard was covered in pavers probably before I was born. So as far as the permeable space back there, I don't know if y'all picked that up. Did y'all pick that up in the review?
Just finish your presentation and it's, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's completely covered. The height, I don't know where the 14-foot measurement came from, but I measured it 3 times on both sides and it's 13 feet 8 inches to the top of the roof.
Okay.
Regarding the exterior corners of the carport, and we'll get to the other item later. The corners are part of my that rear facing fence that was constructed prior to me purchasing the property. So the verticals where it connects on this outside are part of the fence that was reinstalled. Actually the verticals were attached to Schedule 80 steel posts that weren't damaged, but the tongue and groove fence was. And so when I replaced the fence, I used the feathered French quarter 2x8 boards, and so that it would be consistent with what's on the side of the house. So those outside corners were existing before I bought the property. That was existing, those fence posts, all that was. So we connected the outside corners to those verticals. Something about, I think you mentioned something about the carport not being sufficient to cover the components, the solar components on the back of the house. Did you mention something about that?
So just so you understand, this is your time to present your case. So it's not a Q&A piece in terms of questioning staff.
I understand,
If
but
they understood your application. So get through your points and we could get to the Q&A portion
okay.
after you speak.
okay, but that anyway, I mentioned that, Mr. James, because I had not heard that point before. Okay.
Okay, so make it a part of your presentation and we could address it with staff. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that concludes your speaking points? Okay. Anyone here to speak in opposition to BZA item 069-23?
Yes, Will Griffin on behalf of Theodore Rimley. He lives at 4222 Pitt Street. That's adjacent to the rear of this property. First, I'd like to thank the board for having me. Also, we support the recommendation from the staff in denying this variance. As noted, there are 9 requirements for the variance and all 9 were not met. And I want to highlight just a couple of these issues. One being the rear setback, which is adjacent to my client's property of far exceeds the 3-foot requirement. And I believe, as noted in the application of Mr. Ocello, of one of the purposes for this is to cover this electrical solar panel attachment he has to his house to keep it out of the rain and sun. I don't believe that is the depth is that necessary to cover that, to go all the way back to the property line. Also, we would like to highlight that we agree that the reduced permeability is significant. And we feel the height violation is also significant, but in another issue, we would like to point out a fire safety issue. The boards that the structure is attached to are not fire rated, and it's a attached structure made of wood. It's attached to the property. We believe that is a fire issue as well. And another thing we'd like to point out is the carport structure, I believe, is the only one, as the staff report noted, of the 44 properties in this area. And I don't believe it existed. You can look on Google Images. I don't believe it existed prior to this construction. It's a new construction as well. There's no history of it being there. And all of these have affected my client's enjoyment of his property, water runoff and so that's all we have for Mr. Rimley. I want to highlight those issues and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this request? Seeing none, since there's opposition, the property owner has a chance to rebut.
Yes, I didn't say that the carport was existing. I said the fences were existing and the fences allowed for the verticals to be constructed. Once the solar panel people told me that you need to get that thing covered so that you can keep it out of the weather. As far as trying to, shrink it or move it back or whatever, that didn't make any sense. I know Ted, we're good friends, and this is the first I've ever heard about any opposition to it. He was fine with what was going on out there. So that's a little bit of a surprise to me. The only question he had was whether or not I was going to put a gutter on it, and the gutter's there with the downspout going toward the street. So that would be my answers to those.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board? Well, and so, yeah, I mean, if anybody, well, let me just add some color. So, Mr. Ocello? Just a quick question to you.
Yes.
Did you get a chance to review the staff's report that was issued last week?
No,
Okay,
I did not.
all right. I think it's really important for you to understand the reasoning behind. So there's the 9 criteria questions
Yes,
that they respond to. And there's responses within that 9 criteria that explain why certain items have not been met.
Okay.
You didn't have a chance to look
No,
at
I
that
did
at all?
not.
Okay.
No.
I think that would add a lot of color for you to understand why we're dealing with this and, or at least the response that we have right now.
okay,
While, for example, just dealing with this fence, just because the fence line is there, fence is totally different from creating the ability to build a structure within the rear yard. And I understand it's a carport, but once you add a roof onto any vertical element, and especially attaching it back to the primary building, you're creating a structure that no one can be able to regulate in terms of how it later can be enclosed or how it may function at a different time. So it's kind of this thing kind of almost came about in its own little organic form in terms of how you develop this package. But I think there's a lot of value in terms of what the staff provided as a part of this report to help justify why they have the position they have.
the permeability issue is something I don't really understand.
Yeah.
And so I guess I could address that back and forth.
Well, actually, Commissioner,
Well, I was gonna
if you have
say,
some points.
it's kind of irrelevant because you've covered the whole thing with a roof. So, and by covering the whole thing with a roof, if we were to approve it, that would mean that you could build 3 stories up to 35 feet
Understood.
at that site. So that's that's what's driving this. Now, the permeability thing.
And if
I
you
think-
actually may explain to him what the permeability means, because I think
Yeah.
that's where he may not be understanding. what
But
that-
if you didn't have that structure there, you
Uh-huh.
would still need to have a certain amount of permeability on the site, which is, grass or open space or whatever. Now, I understand that you used to have grass on top of concrete
Well,
or something
yeah,
back then, if I
I-
remember reading the report. Yeah. So it may have been a pre-existing addition, but I mean, once you start modifying, we need to address that. But I don't think that's really the concern here. I think it's that you've built a carport over a part of the site that is not within the by right. But the other thing that we look at when we look at these projects is, are there alternatives for how you can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And,
Right.
I understand you need to have your solar equipment indoors, and that was maybe part of the motivation for doing this, but I mean, the equipment could be indoors. I mean, you've got a house there. I don't know what's going on inside, but that could have been the way to do it, right? And I understand that this was an after the fact thing for you because you put the solar panels on, they added equipment, and they said you need to have it undercover. But I've got big ugly solar panel things in my vestibule of my house because that was the place to do it. So that's kind of an unfortunate condition, but that to us, there's an opportunity. You could put them inside. So that does not satisfy a hardship for us.
Couple of things. There was not room on the inside because it's just jammed up tight.
Well, yeah, but you've got a building there on the site. We're looking at it from cubicle volume, I don't know what's inside.
Right.
You put the solar panels on, your mechanical guys electrical guys could have found a place in the building. So that to us does not constitute a hardship.
So here's where the hardship comes in. After Ida, because I did not have that equipment on the back of the house to make it an agnostic system, I was not able to use the solar panels for the 8-day outage. So I had to augment the solar panels because what the agnostic system keeps my panels from backfeeding into the grid, which you don't want to happen when you have an outage. So I went and upgraded the system for 2 reasons. Number one, so I could have, so my panels would provide the energy I need during an outage. And number 2, obviously to protect, the repair crews while they're up there doing what they need to do. So I didn't know that until after the fact. I learned that the hard way.
So just one thing with regards to the equipment, a way to have protected this would have been to put some form of an equipment enclosure, almost like just a storage panel that's on the lower portion of the facade and enclose it. Almost if you think back to how hot water heaters were stored outside the building, right? Something to that effect could have been done to protect that equipment. I understand you're trying to avoid it having a UV contact. That's an easy way of how to close that piece off.
Right.
The problem, as Ms. Board Member Diaz spoke to, is once we create this footprint in terms of now, because you have to understand, once this carport is in place and because it's attached to the house, it's a continuation of the structure and it's not functioning with the appropriate setback conditions that would need to be addressed with this side condition. And once that happens, even though you've provided the gutter, I'm not sure how this overlaps with the property line right now. Theoretically, let's say if the gutters came, let's say if you sold the house, the gutters came down, you're now shedding water onto the neighboring property, okay?
Right.
So it's just like, I don't take this the wrong way, it's almost like a comedy of errors. It just starts, it's a cascade effect, right?
Yes.
Once one decision is made, okay, let me do this to protect this, now let me do this,
Right.
this, and we're in a really bad position. So just understand that's a big part of what's really driving this ship, and I'm a really strongly advised, just look at the report that the staff had emailed to you.
All right.
To really understand why this has been reviewed the way it has.
Okay. Well, if you guys can send a link or something where I could read it, I thought I would get the report, but I didn't get it in the email.
The staff report was sent this morning, as well as posted publicly online.
Sent this morning.
Correct.
Okay. That's,
But has it changed since the last time around, or is it the same report? Because we've reviewed this before, right?
This is a new application.
This report was deferred from the August 7th meeting.
Okay.
Yeah,
To allow time for staff to adequately review the request and
I got it,
back and
okay.
forth with the applicant.
got it. Sorry, apologies.
All right, and I'm gonna just say this, traditionally, I know that in the past, usually this is supposed to get sent out to applicants at least a week prior. I mean, if they're just getting it the day of the meeting, they're not gonna be in a position to even respond to this correctly. So just, we do have a responsibility to them as well. Any other questions from the board? What's the pleasure of the board?
In regards to 6923, I moved to defer for 30 days. Yeah. Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor for a 30-day deferral. For BZA docket number 069-23, roll call vote, Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yay.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yay.
Commissioner Eggins,
Yes.
and Commissioner James is a yes. Next item.
We will now begin with new business for variance. Item 9, docket number 073-23.
BZA 073-23 is a request for a variance from the provisions of Article 21, Section 21.6.T.1 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit mechanical equipment with insufficient setback, and this is an after-the-fact request. The site in question is located in the Uptown neighborhood with frontage on Hurst Street. The rectangular lot, Lot 27, measures 39 feet in width, 90 in depth, 3,510 square feet in area. The most recent survey dated June 7th, 2022, shows that the site is developed with a single-family home. The applicant is proposing an after-the-fact waiver for mechanical pool equipment that is 0 feet from the interior side lot line. The applicant hired a pool building company who was responsible for the permitting of the pool and the equipment. The pool builder did not file for the proper permits, and the skimmer encroached on the neighboring property, which just so happens to be the applicant's as well. The applicant filed an after-the-fact pool permit and also filed a servitude agreement due to the encroachment on her property. Okay. The Department of Safety and Permits determined as part of its zoning review that the subject proposal is not compliant with Article 21, Section 21.6.T.7.1, and there is insufficient setback.
Okay,
Is that it?
No, I'm sorry. Based on this report, the staff believes that the variances that the variance request fails to meet criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7 of the comprehensive zoning ordinance and recommends denial.
All right, is the applicant present for BZA docket number 073-23?
Yes. My name is Poppy Markwell. I'm the property owner. So the need for this variance was caused by the pool company not placing the equipment where it should have been. The skimmer box is what's in question. You can see under the basketball hoop by my son. And it is made of a rebar and gunite, and we can't move it. So we contracted with a company called Kingfish Pools for a partially above ground pool. And our contract includes that they are responsible for city permitting, inspection, with a 3 to 5 foot from the water's edge setback to satisfy local code. We were told that we would need to order a property survey in order for them to file for the proper permits, which I ordered. Then the pool was built 3 feet from the property line at the water's edge, and the pump and the filter all meet the 2 foot from property line setback. But the pool company acknowledged that he forgot to include the skimmer box in the partially above ground pool in the diagram. Usually it doesn't include the skimmer box in the drawings because it's hidden under the ground. Since he forgot to include it, he decided to put it on that part of the pool because it would have been a tripping hazard in the others. So that he made a decision to do that. And so when I realized the encroachment, I met with a lawyer, and he advised me in September of 2022 to file a servitude by destination boundary agreement, which I did. And then after the pool was completed, and prior to my making a final payment in October of 2022, we received a stop work order from the city. And then the pool company had been insistent that they had gotten a permit, but indeed they hadn't. And then they realized they didn't have the permit, and then they filed for a permit February of 2023. The permit was issued. The inspector came and we passed the final inspection on March 1st of 2023. After we passed the final inspection, then I paid the pool company in full on March 8th, 2023. In April of 2023, our permit was appealed. And we were scheduled to have a hearing here on May 1st in response to a neighbor complaint. And the neighbor is not located, according to the city planner's assessment, they're an uninvolved party. It is not encroaching on their property. And then after the permit was appealed, our hearing was scheduled. We got notification that our hearing was moot. Our permit was rescinded on April 18th. And the explanation was that the site plans submitted with the application are not correct because it did not show the skimmer box location.
Okay.
And then
If you want to bring your comments to a close on, because your time's up right now, but we're gonna have some Q&A. You're not done. But just finish your thought. That's it.
okay.
Okay.
So we received several permitting letters with conflicting information from the city. And then Ms. Jackson gave us a revised letter on May 31st, recommending that we either re-subdivide the lots or apply for a variance with servitude agreement. We talked to our pool company to try to apply for the variance. He said, I'm not doing it for free. He says he's only responsible for normal permitting and the current problem is a neighbor drama. And this is not normal. He said that he got the pool permit and closed it out. And now he wants to be washed of us. He says that he doesn't have any more responsibility to our project and you can sue me. I feel like we're
All right,
being
if you-
bullied.
Just bring your comments to a close, please.
So I would not have paid the contractor in full if the city didn't issue us the permit and then we passed final inspection and then closed it out. The inspector even photographed the skimmer box and all of the equipment at the time of inspection. The city issued us a permit, then we
Ma'am.
paid.
Ma'am, don't continue reading the
Okay.
letter. I'm asking you to bring it to a close. No, we're gonna have Q&A to get deeper into it, but I'm trying to respect the rules of how much time you have as a speaker, okay?
Okay, one sentence.
One sentence.
Okay, the only, if the variance fails, our only options would be to either rezone the lots or enter a lawsuit with the pool company, and there's no guarantee that either would be successful.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in support of the request for BZA docket number 0783-23? Anyone here to speak in opposition?
Can you tell Robin that we're gonna move? We're gonna move.
Good morning, Justin Schmidt, 1506 7th Street, New Orleans, 70115, representing the immediately adjacent neighbors to the rear, Mr. and Mrs. Carl Kehoe. Contrary to Dr. Markwell's statements, they are affected by this. There are a few things that besides adding or besides agreeing with the staff's recommendation of denial, because this variance fails to meet several criteria of the 9 criteria and really takes this out of the hands of the board for that matter. A few things we wanted to just highlight. This pool, contrary to the October contract that's submitted in the purchase or that's submitted in the plans or the application, the October 6, 2002 estimate to get the building permit, the pool was already built. The pool was built as reflected on the June 7, 2022 survey. It was built back in early June 2022. It came, as my correspondence says, it came as a result of, there was a large pecan tree there, was taken down in Ida, it fell in the backyard. They decided to sink a pool there instead of replacing the dirt there once the tree was removed. We've been working on this. I've been working on this on my client since the summer of 2022, bringing this to the city's attention for various reasons. There also, while not relevant today, was another structure that was rebuilt on the property on the other corner that was built without permits. And the city's records reflect that those were all done without permits as well. To also note this was not merely a mistake of the skimmer basket being put across the property line, although that's what we're here for today. but for the luck of an omnibus amendment to the CZO in October of 2022, they would have needed a variance for the rear yard setback as well, because prior to that omnibus, prior to the omnibus amendment, the setback was 4 feet for the property line, not just 4 feet from structures. And so it was 3 feet. If you look at the survey, it was violative not only of the side yard setback, which is a property that's also owned in another entity by Dr. Markwell and her husband, but also in violation of the rear yard setback because it was 3 feet and not 4 feet. They lucked out on having to get relief for the rear yard, but this was built without a permit. And so for those reasons, it really needs to be denied, and there's no hardship here other than, her redress is against her contractor who dug a pool improperly.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Anyone else here to speak in opposition on this request? All right, the property owner has a chance to rebut. And just be cognizant, when y'all hear the phone going off, that is the timer for your allotted time, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
I feel like we are being bullied. We have been taken advantage by the pool company. We did what the city told us, including applying for the variance. And then the city's actions of appeal and then rescission is being driven by a spectator party. The planner notes that the only other property affected is also owned by the applicant. And so that they're not involved. The city planner, I looked over the citations that the city planner cited. And it doesn't appear to apply to our specific situation. It wasn't, the skimmer box wasn't the issue in the other cases that they could find, looking through the publicly available documents on One Stop. One was, one equipment setback was approved, 3 were withdrawn. So, I mean, again, I wouldn't have paid the contractor in full if the city didn't issue us the permit and then we passed final inspection and the permit was closed out. This is what we're talking about, the skimmer box. I looked at the other diagrams included like on the other citations. And I mean, this is our diagram that the pool company submitted. The other ones that I could find on One Stop, they don't mention the skimmer box because it's not an issue, because ours is a partially above ground pool. So it's an above ground box. I'm trying to pick a fight with the neighbor. They're doing $1 million construction right behind us, blocking our views, and we didn't have any notification that was even going to happen. So I guess they don't want to look directly at us in their backyard. I mean, it's an infringement on our privacy as well. But appreciate your time.
All right, thank you. So I'm gonna just bring this as a point of clarity. I actually have a big issue that you're hearing that the pool contractor's not here dealing with this. That baffles me that they're not even here present dealing with this situation, but that's not for you to address. So
I can speak to that. They sent an email and said they did not want to be involved in this process at
it's
all.
something that they created. That's it. That's amazing. That's why, don't get me started, right? People's accountability blows my mind. Anyway, any questions from the board?
Yeah, I have one. So,
Okay, go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry. I'm fired up. All right. If the equipment were below grade, would it require the variance as well?
It wouldn't matter.
All right. It wouldn't matter, or it wouldn't be?
It wouldn't be because it's above ground, it has a proximity to the yard line, but if it was below ground, it wouldn't.
Right. So how far above grade is this?
Like how many feet
Yeah.
above ground level? I don't know. Maybe 2 feet.
So wait, time out, because if that's the case, I think there's a pretty clear rule that those structures don't count till I think it's 12 or 18 inches above grade.
That I don't know. Emily?
I'm sorry,
All
could
right.
you repeat the question?
I know, there's a lot of sidebars happening right now. The question that was asked was, if this was a below ground piece of equipment, it would not count in terms of it falling within the setback. And I don't know if that's necessarily how it works, but I thought it was, if it's anything that's a structural element that's 18, I want to say it's either 12 or 18 inches in height is when it becomes a structural thing in terms of the setback requirement. Is that correct?
I know that's the definition for decks. I can double check the CZO if that's a general.
Okay.
Provision.
I know that does apply to the deck condition, but if this is the case with regards to, I'm actually kind of baffled on it because I thought when we get into the equipment setback requirements, it's when it impedes the line of access along that stretch. So if it is below, theoretically below grade or theoretically below the paved surface, why would it count?
Yeah, well, and also since they own both properties, can we not just?
And I was gonna
dump some
get to
dirt
that.
On the, to fill up the grade.
I know Mr. Smith is raising his hand and it's usually not protocol, Mr. Smith, but please, if you have some color that you like to bring into it, because I know you've done your research.
First of all, it is above 18 inches. Second of all, it's illegal to build across lot lines. You can't have equipment for one.
Totally agree on that
You-
piece.
You're
Yeah.
fully aware of that. A servitude is and I have this in my papers. I put this in my papers in 2022. A servitude doesn't negate the issue with setback.
Correct.
The only answer here that I can see is you either move it or you resub and you provide the proper setback.
And actually, that was gonna be my later point was, has there been any communication with this particular applicant to staff with regards to the potential of a resub to address this in the rear yard area? Because if it is 18 inches, look, again, that comes down to surveying it on that side of the property. So I'm gonna stay out of that piece a little bit for right now, but with regards to remedy, as opposed to us coming up here dealing with a BZA waiver, is a resub even in discussion?
If this was denied, that was gonna be my suggestion.
Okay, so I'm kind of like avoiding situations because I hate creating restriction around something, especially on a denial piece, when there's an administrative option that already exists to try to remedy this problem. So looking at it and went back to check, no, this is, they own both properties. So theoretically, because of this condition, a resub would be the appropriate venue to look at this in changing the property line in the rear yard so that its setback is no longer required.
Well, in my, asking my opinion, the appropriate way would be to get the pool company to fix it and do
They
it.
own both properties.
Right.
It's a structure that's in place. Once a pool is in place on a property, nobody's removing that. All right. And unless they're gonna completely demolish that end of that pool condition. I know we're not talking about costs, but the reality of spending the time for her to go through the legalese, do a resub is cheaper than her having to pay somebody to do the work, then go file a lawsuit against the pool company to then come back and deal with it. I mean,
You're correct.
it's a lot. Sorry. So I can't take a month off and come back. Any other questions from the board?
And after this, I can explain what that process entails for you if you'd like.
If you come up to the mic, please.
I do not know the height of the wall. I can measure if the 18 inches or less would make it, that I wouldn't necessary, then would I have to go through the re-subdivision?
I would tell you, you still need to get a survey done. I wouldn't just trust the measurement. Just because of the nature of what's going on and the challenge that could ensue from you just trying to go out there and measure it yourself.
Okay.
And I don't even know if that's still gonna remedy it.
Well, I was also bringing up what the definition of grade is. Because,
Oh, God, don't even, yeah.
no, but I mean, if the yard were filled a little bit, would it still be above ground?
Then you gotta put a retaining wall on the
Yeah.
edge.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, I'm
Yeah,
trying to come
I
up with a
hear you.
creative solution. But I think that there's some avenues to explore, with staff and with some professional help, I hope. But yeah, I think.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor and a second to defer this item 60 days. I think the reason why you're hearing that gives you the time to go through it, and it's gonna probably take you that amount of time to get it started.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So would the retaining wall like appease this?
No, so, yeah, I think we kind of passed that point right now because the motion that's on the floor. Talk to staff,
Appease, okay.
Talk to staff.
talk to staff once we get past this
And
motion.
get some professional
Advice, yeah,
assistance.
we're not gonna be able to tell you how to fix this from the dais.
Okay.
All right, so just to resolve that, we had a motion and a second on the floor for BZA docket number 073-23 for a 60-day deferral to allow the property owner time to consider another administrative remedy to address this application. Roll call vote, Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yeah.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yeah.
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner James is a yes, and that motion passed. Next item.
There has been a request to hear item 14 out of order as the next item. Would the board make a motion to take this item out of order?
And to clarify, that's BZA docket number 078-23.
Yes, for the property at 5015 South Johnson Street.
If motions are in order,
I move to, here at order item 14, BZA 078-23.
Second.
all right, we have a motion and a second to hear docket, item number 14, docket number BZA 78-23 out of order. Roll call vote, Commissioner Alvarez.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gonzalez. Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Eggins,
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
Commissioner James is a yes. Let's move to item number 14.
Right. BZA 078-23 is a request for a variance for the property at 5015 South Johnson Street. The applicant is proposing a change in use from a single family to an accessory bed and breakfast with insufficient off-street parking. While the front yard of the property is covered with concrete that has previously served as a parking pad, as depicted in historic Google Maps and images dating back to 2007, the Department of Safety and Permits determined that the existing single-family residence has an inherent deficiency of one off-street parking space. Bed and breakfasts are required to provide one off-street parking space per every 2 guest bedrooms. The applicant is proposing 4 guest bedrooms, which would require 2 off-street parking spaces. The applicant is providing no off-street parking and seeking a waiver of 2 off-street parking spaces. Based on this report, the staff believes that the requested variance of Article 22, Section 22-4A, Table 22-1, off-street parking requirements fails to meet criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 of the standards of variances of Article 4, Section 4.6.f, and that there are no special circumstances which are peculiar to the land. Literal interpretation of the ordinance will not deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the district. The special circumstances were caused by the applicant. The variance will confer on the applicant's special privileges. The variance will alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Regulations will not result in a demonstrable hardship. The change is exclusively for the convenience and profit of the owner. The variance will be detrimental to public welfare, and the variance will endanger the public safety.
All right, the applicant's present for BZA docket number 078-23.
Yes, good morning, Board. Zach Smith Consulting, 530 South Norman, C. Francis. On behalf of the owner, Mr. Riley, who is present, we are here to talk about these criteria. Obviously, looking at essentially a 0 out of 9 is always an interesting way to start. And one of the fundamental questions we want to go over is the fact that we do believe that staff does not bring into consideration the fact that by definition, a bed and breakfast is a single. There's been a lot of kind of to essentially say what it's, we don't have a history of this. It doesn't appear that anybody's asked for this. When we look at this project, we know by definition that this has to be a single family home. Now, yes, there are some additional considerations for parking that are very clear in table 22.1. But to not compare this to single family homes when by definition, these things are single family homes. So looking at, all the criteria, we essentially look at this and we've seen a history in the report where there's been 13 similar cases for parking for singles and doubles, where 7 have been approved, 4 rendered moot, 2 withdrawn. Fundamentally, we believe that's there. Looking at the photos, you guys can see that, there's no plan for expansion. There's no plan for change. It's pretty obvious and apparent that this is an existing condition. Is an existing condition for no parking, where no parking has been created legally, and none can physically be created legally. So the idea that this property is trying to do something new or trying to do something that is different and fun.
Zero 78-23.
Good morning, Board.
Morning.
My name is Nathaniel Raleigh. I am the owner of 5015 South Johnson Street. And we have been operating and I have been living there and running it as the STR, which my license expired in August. And I'm now applying to run it as a bed and breakfast, which I do occupy the residence. And as my consultant said, in the past that it has been a property that has been rented to college students. And there's a question of parking. And that is a 5-bedroom building. And, if I were renting and get to 5 college students with 5 cars, then that's still the same parking issue. This comes down to, and not the question of parking, it's a question of what the neighbors are actually saying in the neighborhood, what they do and don't want. So I ask that, that the license be issued and that my variance be approved.
All right, that concludes your comments. All right, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in support of this request? Anyone here to speak in opposition?
Good afternoon, board members. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak today. My name is Bobby Hortzberg. I live at 3314 Robert Street. My backyard backs up with this property that's been being operated on and off as an illegal Airbnb since I moved in. They've hosted loud parties at this place at all hours of the night. There's never been anybody that's permanently lived at this residence. To say that they do or that they have is a complete lie. In fact, this individual during this opposition process has come and has admitted as such that he does not live there. He has a cell phone number that's registered to an address in Harahan. I've never seen this man before. I lived there for 3 years. What is also a little bit disturbing, and I think we should bring to the attention of this body, is that during this process, during this opposition process, this individual uninvited has popped up at many people's residences who opposed his variance. He told one of my neighbors, and I quote, "If I don't get this variance, I'm going to turn this into a Section 8 property and you're going to have a single mother with a bunch of kids running around next door." As if that was somehow going to deter us. Because this property lies vacant most of the time, there's currently a coyote living under the property. We know this because my neighbor came home after being gone for a couple of days and went looking for his cat who had been missing. Guess what he found under the house with the coyote, the cat? Without being too graphic, it was very obvious that the coyote killed the cat. I'm here today to talk about a bad actor. This is the problem that we have with giving someone a variance in this situation, is because they have continuously shown to be bad actors. They've not followed the rules in any way, shape, or form, and this is just a money grab. If he wants to turn it to a Section 8 property, we certainly invite that. In fact, if it did happen, I'd be happy to meet the new property residents with flowers and cookies. Thank you very much.
Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this request?
My name's Brian Broussard and I live at 3235 Jefferson Avenue. And my property directly abuts this property in question on South Johnson. And I can echo, I don't even know you, neighbor, but I'm gonna have to introduce myself after this. But I believe that it has been operated as an off the books Airbnb. Everyone that lives in our neighborhood is, we bought here because it's a residential neighborhood and we want to keep it as such. I know my neighbors, I'm about to meet a new one, but I know the people live across the street from me, next door to me, next door to them. And the main issue is that, they're talking about this parking encroachment, but the fact is, if you park cars on that, it obstructs the sidewalk. And what we want to do is we want to make sure our quality of life in a residential neighborhood is maintained as a high quality of life and not having a revolving door of people coming through the city to enjoy themselves. And we want that, but there's certain areas in the city that are designated for that purpose, for hosting visitors. And our neighborhood is not one of them. And as such, we would like to, I request that you all deny this variance. So I think that's about all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you.
I've made my point, echoed what my friend here says.
Got it. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this request? All right, Mr. Riley or Mrs. Smith, you have the chance to rebut. Please note that your time is limited to 3 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to make 2 comments based upon what the gentleman said. He made a question about my cell phone number and about that's not a what he was saying, a number for the area. Well, if that's the case, then he say he lives on Robert Street, which is in New Orleans. His area code is 512. So I guess you really don't live on Robert Street. The other part was he was saying that it was an illegal, we were running a legal STR. I have a license for that. It's expired now and it has not been rented since then. So again, that's another false statement that he made. That's 2 false statements. Also, he talks about a coyote. Again, that's not for this meeting here. That's an issue of animal control. I don't own a coyote. I don't run a coyote farm. So if a coyote is running loose in Broadmoor, what are you going to do? Attack me for a werewolf running loose in London? That's not my problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the board? What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, for motions in order.
If you have one.
Think I do. In regards to docket BZA 078-23, I move to deny the requested variance per the staff's recommendation, noting that all of the 9 criteria have not been met for this particular docket number. Thank you.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor for BZA docket number 078-23. As that motion was presented was for denial of Article 22, Section 22.4.a, Table 22-1 for off-street parking requirements. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yay.
Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Eggins.
Yes.
And Commissioner James is a yes as well. That motion has passed. Next item.
The board may choose to combine BZA dockets 073-22 and 074-23. I'm sorry. As they're in conjunction with the same subdivision request.
All right, we have a request to consolidate the next 2 docket items.
Yes, BZA 073-23 and 074-23.
And just one quick clarification, it's 07423 and 07523.
It's 7.4 and 7.5. Wait, yeah, correct.
I just so moved. Go ahead.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor to consolidate items 9 and 10, BZA docket number, items 10 and 11, BZA docket numbers 074-23 and BZA 075-23. Roll call vote, Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
Commissioner Eggins,
Yes.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
And Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yeah.
And Commissioner James is a yes to consolidate those items.
I'm going to be presenting on behalf of Robin Jones.
Okay.
BZA 0423 and 05 is a request for variances from the provision of Article 13, Section 13.3.A.1, Table 13.2 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance in conjunction with subdivision docket 22-20 to permit the creation of a lot resulting in insufficient lot area, insufficient lot width, insufficient front yard setback after the fact. At its June 27, 2023 meeting, the City Planning Commission granted tentative approval to the subdivision docket SD 022-20, subject to waivers being granted by the BZA for deficiencies in the 2 proposed lots area, width, and front yard setback. The re-subdivision request was originally submitted in 2020 with the intention of building single-family dwellings on each of the 2 lots, but for a variety of reasons, including some possibly related to the COVID-19 pandemic, the original request was never presented to the CPC in 2020. The variance request to permit creation of the 2 lots with insufficient lot width and lot area is the same as it would have been in 2020 or 2021 if the subdivision process had progressed normally. However, because construction was erroneously commenced on the 2 proposed lots before they were approved, it resulted in one of the dwellings, the one at 1216 Sears Street, encroaching 3 feet onto the lot next door at 1212 Sears Street. That encroachment will be cured by the subdivision if the lot width and area waivers are granted. However, this request also includes an after-the-fact front yard setback waiver request, as both of the dwellings are up to a foot short of the 20-foot minimum required front yard setback in the SRD zoning district. Given the highly unusual circumstances surrounding the proposed criterion of the 2 subject lots and the subsequent construction of the 2 dwellings, the staff finds that the request for lot width, lot area, and front setback relief meet all 9 criteria for approval. Therefore, the staff recommends approval of BZA 074-23 and BZA 075-23 subject to the one proviso cited in the staff report.
All right, is the applicant present for BZA docket numbers 074-23 and 075-23?
Yes, good afternoon. Jason Hernandez, 6270 Canal Boulevard, on behalf of the applicant 1212 Sear and 1216 Sear LLC. We wanted to first thank the staff for their guidance in getting this back on track, especially given the unique circumstances with which the application was submitted and then the subsequent construction of both houses. Again, we thank them for that. And really, I'm just here to answer any questions that the board may have.
All right, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in support of these requests? Seeing and hearing none. Anyone here to speak in opposition to BZA docket number 075-74 and 75-23? Seeing none. Any questions from the board? What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion's in order.
Yes, please.
Regarding to, docket BZA 074-23. I move to approve the request of waivers of Article 13, Section 13.3A1, Article 13, Section, lot area, lot width, and front yard setback, based on the staff recommendations for approval, subject to the one proviso.
All right, and that's for both 7.4 and 7.5.
That is for both 7.4 and 7.5. All right.
All right, we have a motion on the floor.
Second.
All right, we have a motion in the second. For BZA docket number 074 and 75-23 for the requested waivers. A motion on the floor to approve the request for waivers of Article 13, Section 13.3A1, Table 13.2 for lot area, lot width, and front yard setback. Understanding that the 9 criteria have been met and noting the one proviso, roll call vote, Commissioner Alvarez.
Yay.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yay.
Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
And Commissioner James is a yes, and those 2 items has passed. Next item.
Item 12, docket 076-23.
Zoning docket 7623 is a request for variances from the provisions of Article 11, Section 11.3A1, Article 21, Section 21.6N1A, and Article 22, Section 2211A1A of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit an addition to a single-family dwelling resulting in insufficient permeable open space and the construction of a fence with excessive height and a driveway with excessive width. The property in question is located in the Garden District and includes 1237 Washington Avenue and 2710 Chestnut Streets. The 2 properties are currently being subdivided to produce 2 new lots, with the Washington Avenue property being expanded to make room for the proposed addition and 2710 being reduced with a tentative approval to demolish the single-family residence there. The applicant is proposing an addition to the property at 1237 Washington along its Chestnut Street side, adding a covered carport, which predicated the current waiver request. Essentially, the applicant is proposing to shift the driveway, which was historically excessive of the CZO requirements at just over 20 feet wide along the Chestnut Street property line, and reconstructing the 9-foot 9-inch masonry fence at its current height and maintaining the existing gate, which is creating the need for this variance. Because the property previously featured an adequate minimum permeable open space, the proposal also requires a variance for that, although it should be noted that the expanded lot will result in a slightly improved permeable open space ratio. Staff's analysis noted in Table 1 and Figure 6 and 7 found that overall, both permeable open space and driveway width featured a relatively high rate of noncompliance in the survey area. Due to the resolution of the aerial imagery and limited data availability, staff was unable to quantify all fence height in the survey area. However, an informal survey did show that many of the fences in the neighborhood appear to comply with the 7-foot requirement, although there also do appear to be exceptions, particularly near rear parking areas where fence heights and construction materials tended to deviate. There's a trend of the Garden District for variable fence heights with a mix of ornamental lower fences in the facade and higher opaque fencing to the rear. Despite that the applicants are essentially planning to relocate existing nonconformities rather than introduce new ones,
and the fact that there do appear to be relatively high rates of non-compliance with the requested variances, staff found that the applicant did not meet a strict interpretation of criteria 1, 3, 6, and 7. Essentially, staff found that there was nothing unusual about the property, which is far above the median size per lot in the study area. And while it might pose an inconvenience, that the applicant could technically seek an alternative route for compliance. For these reasons, staff recommends denial.
Is applicant present for BZA docket number 076-23?
Yes, Kelly Duggan with Weber Consulting, 2131 Bienville Street, representing the property owner who is also here. First, we'd just like to thank the staff for their really thorough analysis and responsiveness throughout this process. And we just want to specifically address the 4 criteria that the staff is contending we do not comply with and offer our interpretation. The first criteria is, do these special conditions and circumstances exist? And the staff's response to this item really focuses on the size of the lot. And we agree, there is nothing special about the size of this lot. However, the criteria specifically also includes the structure or building involved. And in this case, the structure and building is special and constitutes special circumstances. So, and also there are special circumstances that relate to its relationship to the lot. So the building is the only original masonry structure on the square. It was designed nearly 200 years ago by James Gallier Jr., one of the most noted New Orleans architects. And while there are many fine historic homes in the vicinity, it is in a partial control district. So many of those homes have been modified over time without the discretion of the HDLC. And this is a beautiful example of, and I'm sure you have the images in your packet, but a beautiful example of a Greek revival structure that has retained the majority of its historically significant architectural features. It's hard to find the same combination of superior materials, importance, and age of this building in the vicinity. So we believe that that constitutes a special condition for sure. Because there is this inherent historic and architectural value, the applicants have elected not to construct an addition within the site's buildable area, which would be in the side yard. And you should be able to see that in your site plan and also in the Sanborn maps. As that would really detract from the rhythm of these 3 bays at the facade. And, building it in the side yard would disrupt also that historic relationship of the building to the lot. It was situated to the far left corner, depending on which view you're looking at, with this expansive side yard open space. So the owners are trying to modernize this 200-year-old building. It's understandable that they would need to do so. The envelope is no longer meeting their modern needs as a family. And rather than constructing this addition in the buildable area, they want to just relocate it to the rear. Again, to protect that historic integrity of the site and of the building itself. The next one is criteria 3. Do any conditions result from the actions of the applicant? The staff's contention is that this requirement is not met because the applicants have elected to construct the addition, but we contend that that argument is really flawed. The point of this criterion is to ensure that the special conditions are not self-created. So if a developer creates a subdivision with a series of really small lots and then wants to build houses on them and says they don't have the setback for that.
Bring your comments to a close.
Will do. So, this is not one of those types of situations where they have created this hardship and now are asking for a variance. They haven't taken any action. They're asking for your approval prior to taking action. So just in conclusion, we truly believe
bring your comments to a close. Please.
Sure. Last sentence. We truly believe that the siting of this addition is the most compatible location and it protects the historic and architectural integrity of the building and its relationship to the lot. So we ask for your approval.
Anyone else here to speak in support of this request?
Yes, Nicole Weber, Weber Consulting on behalf of the applicant who are here today. Just to follow up on our presentation and to kind of fill in what Kelly was unable to completely discuss. It's important to note again that this is a James Gallier Jr. Architect built property. And so in order for us to maintain the historic character of the building and along the lines of what the National Park Service would agree with. If we built in the side yard, we'd be taking away from the historic structure altogether. And again, as brought up in the staff report, more than half of the surrounding properties and also noted in our report on page 32, also around the area, many of these properties have exceeded the width in the driveway as well as the fence height. And it's important to note that there is a historic brick wall along the rear of the building that is at that 9 feet, over 9.5 feet. So everything has been based off of that. It's evident in the Sanborn map that is shown on page 28 of our letter. Again, we aren't asking for anything that isn't existing. We're asking to be able to maintain the conformity with regard to the fence and then with regard to the driveway. If we were able to put a garage back there, which we wouldn't be able to because of the rear yard setback, we would have to put it in the side yard. And again, taking away from this very historic property. And you'll hear from other supporters. We've got 10 letters of support. The Garden District Association also supports. And the fact that we're doing this, we've been working on this for 18 months and have looked at this every way we possibly could. So the waivers that we are asking for are minimized as much as we can in terms of permeability. Currently, there's only a 23% permeability. We're increasing that to 29%. If we were to reduce that further, that would require us to do a hardship and pull up the bricks along the front yard, which are again contributing to the historic character of the property. And then any other changes in terms of the waivers, we've looked at the most minimal impact possible. And so that's why 2 of the waivers, the fence and the driveway, are in line with what's already there. And we've given several examples of other properties that have that same height and driveway width. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in support of this request?
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Wittry, 1239 Barone Street. I am a city planning commissioner as well as a real estate broker, but I'm here today as a neighbor and a preservationist. I'm very sensitive to streetscapes, and we have an opportunity here to improve this streetscape. It's very difficult to modernize our historic structures and our built environment. And we have an opportunity today to do that. How cool it is that this is a James Gallier house that was built 200 years ago. And that in fact, as families grow, people just don't need to be able to pick up and move to sort of find those houses that meet their needs. They have an opportunity here to actually make a statement and make this addition blend into the streetscape. I think we can all think of variances that have not been given for additions over the years and how the addition is overbearing. And I know that from these plans that the addition will not be overbearing, and how much of our built environment this particular property is. Commander's Palace is a block away, and how many thousands of people actually come to Commander's and maybe just walk 1 block down the street, and they're not going to experience this historic architecture unless they go out of the country or to Disney World. So the fact that we can actually have an opportunity here to maintain our historic structure, but also modernize it, is a gift to be able to give to this house. Thank you.
Anyone else here in support?
Hi, my name is Tom Benson, really. I'm a neighbor, live across the street at 2727 Chestnut Street. I'm fully in support of giving them this variance. The structure that they want to take down, frankly, doesn't even belong in the neighborhood. It's a 1-story ranch house that probably would not ever have been able to be built if permits were being given out today. Frankly, them taking that down and making the improvements to the streetscape and to the quality of the neighborhood, I think it's an absolute benefit to all of us. So I just want to express my 100% support, and I hope that you guys do approve the variances. Thank you.
Anyone else here in support of this request? Anyone here in opposition? Hearing none, any questions from the board?
I think I just have one about the design strategy and the shifting of the parking. Cardinal directions are difficult towards downtown versus tucking the parking under the addition. I'm just curious whether that was something that the NPS objected to or HGLC or why that was the strategy versus what you guys did?
I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. So to raise or to have the parking underneath the addition.
Yeah.
So that would take away from the historic character of the building. To have it as a separate carport, the parking is much more preferable than to have a garage door that is immediately attached to the building. So it is a separate carport structure. Although it would not be underneath or part of the kind of living area. So to have that parking under the living area would change.
Right. But is that my question, is that an NPS statement or is that in alignment with NPS standards or is that something that just is a preference?
I can speak to that. That wasn't discussed, but I think that the National Park Service would view that as incompatible. This house was constructed before cars, obviously, well before cars. So to have a carport as an integral part of it would be an incompatible addition. To have it on the side, it's clear that it's new, that it is expressive of its age and not an integral part of the building.
Thanks. And also just to be clear, the subdivision and all that's not part of this, right? That's a separate. Just because I was mentioned by some of the neighbors.
The variances are predicated on the proposed lot, not the existing lot, if that makes sense.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I was clarifying. Yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
Motion in order, if you got one. Sorry, in regards to docket 7623, I move to approve the proposal citing the letter provided by the applicant. Were there any provisos that? Sorry if I tuned out.
No provisos were included.
Okay. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor for BZA docket number 076-23 to approve the request for the requested waivers of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1, Table 11-2B for minimum permeable open space. Article 21, Section 21.6.N.1.8 for minimum fence height. And Article 22, Section 22-11.A.1.A for minimum driveway width. And accepting the applicant's representative's letter addressing the remaining criteria and the move for approval with the with zero, you said no provisos or one proviso? Sorry.
There were no provisos included.
Zero provisos. Okay.
Staff would recommend adding some, though. We would recommend adding the first standard proviso, which requires the site plan, floor plans, particularly for this new accessory structure and architectural elevations, also for the fence.
So is it the standard 3?
I would say the standard 2, the first 2.
First 2.
So also the DPW as the driveway will be moving.
So I know that's at least staff making that recommendation. Do you want to amend your motion to acknowledge those 2 provisos?
Yes. And also just to note the commentary about the historic,
The MPS.
the MPS stuff as a satisfying.
Got it.
Yeah.
Note that motion and agreed on a second.
Absolutely.
Okay. Roll call vote, Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yay.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Eggins,
Yes.
Commissioner James is a yes, and that motion passes modified, excuse me.
Item 13, docket number 077-23.
BZA 7723 is a request for a property at 929 State Street to provide front yard parking with an insufficient driveway depth at a single-family residence, which requires a waiver of front yard parking and a driveway depth waiver of 2.42 feet. So staff acknowledges that there is a hardship as there is not enough buildable width to provide a compliant off-street parking space at the site. However, the applicant does not meet 3 of the 9 criteria for variances. Staff also notes there is an error in the staff report. Page 2 of the staff report only lists that the applicant does not meet criteria 2 and 4, when in fact, as shown on page 12, the applicant does not meet criteria 2, 4, and 5, and that literal interpretation of the ordinance would not deprive the applicant of commonly enjoyed rights. The variance will confer on the applicant's special privileges, and the variance will alter the essential character of the locality. Therefore, staff recommends denial of the request.
And just to clarify, it's the 2 or 3? Which one?
It's 3.
It's the 3. Thank
Mhm.
you. All right, the applicant's ready to present.
Good afternoon, board. Zach Smith, on behalf of the property owner, Zach Smith Consulting, 530 South Normandy, Francis. I was hoping you'd say there was a mistake and you were gonna take more off the board, but we did see the addition of the 3rd in the report. Related to 2, 4, and 5, 2 and 4 relatively similar, and our responses are essentially, there was notes about standards not being met, not enough instances. We point to a couple of specifics, specifically this is 929 State Street. 925 State Street was approved and granted a variance by this board that requested a few things. We've seen several other instances where this has become essentially the prevailing condition. There's 2 other variances about front yard parking that have been granted both in 2019 and 2017 and as far back as 2010. Related to parking design, we've that same exact variance right next door at 925 State Street was also not just allowed to be in the front yard, but also paving in excess. Another 28.5% was what that was granted for. So we do believe there's some specifics, especially to the 900 block of State Street, that essentially we believe are enough to move the needle for number 2 and 4. Specific to number 5, we politely disagree with the staff on the essential character of the locality. We have front yard parking at 901, 911, 919, 925, and 933 State Street, just to stay on the odd side of that block. There's similar parking specifically waived next door. We have all sorts of continuing, we do note, the higher traffic potential from the Magazine Street corridor nearby. And again, we appreciate the staff's time. We just politely disagree on this, especially looking at the specifics of this block and the surrounding area, the number of instances of front yard parking, and specifically the number of waivers and front yard parking on this block alone. Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in support of this request?
Good morning. I'm Laura Will. I'm the homeowner at 929 State Street. Thank you all for your time and for also what you're doing. I think it's been very eye-opening for me today as just a citizen. So I appreciate all the work that is going on here, I would just say. We've lived here for just about 9 years. My car and my husband's car have both been totaled on the street. Our children have almost gotten hit by a car. Actually, our friend's door was damaged when she opened it. We really view this as a safety issue for our family. It's important to us. We love our neighborhood. We love the front of our house. We certainly wouldn't want to change that. It really is a matter of safety for us. And I think on top of that, we have support from our neighbors. I have letters and text messages and information from all of them sharing that they're in support of this because they see what has happened to our cars on the street and to our family, and they care about us as neighbors. So I would just appreciate your consideration for this approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in support of this request? Anyone here to speak in opposition? Seeing none, any questions from the board?
do have a question of staff. So the neighboring property, I'm not remembering that
925.
925, yeah. Because that does look pretty not to the spirit of what we try to accomplish typically. So I'm just curious what the story was there before we move on. I know it's not before us, but it's relevant because it's being used as precedent.
I don't have that information in front of me, but I can look it up.
Yeah. Emily, by any chance, do you have any recollection on 925 State Street and that's approval?
This came before us previously.
Correct.
Let me double check.
And just, Mrs. Smith, what year was that? 2011.
2011, and I believe the homeowner could give you any backstory on that if.
That's a previous CZO and that may have predated when did that predate when the front yard requirements changed for State Street in Nashville? You don't think so?
I believe they were the same under the former.
Okay. I know it existed before the 2015 change, but I remember that there was some clarifying amendments that occurred back then with, at that time because of how front yard parking existed on those historically between State and Nashville.
A lot of people would have to confirm that, but what I can tell you is that it was originally, recommended for denial on that 2011 case and approved by the board. Related to the front yard parking, we'd have to go and see. We did not specifically get into that. With looking at the rest of the criteria based on a 2017 and a 2019 variance relatively close by. And of course, the odd side of the 900 block just continue to have front yard parking. Essentially, it's the odd duck out is to not have a off-street parking space.
All right, so I think it's just kind of important to note what time frame. I think I might be the only person that was actually here in 2011, which is kind of scary. Yeah.
Well, and just look, I mean, that so long ago that it kind of doesn't
Different
really-
animal.
Yeah, and looking at the properties, it looks like it's kind of sharing the driveway of the neighbor, which is actually on another property line. So anyway, I just bring that up just because it's very much a aberrant case and is exactly the poster child of what we're trying not to do with front yard parking. So that said, I understand the applicant's challenges and concerns, and God knows you're not the only person that has those problems in the city, but we're really trying to avoid having houses in front of properties, especially of this kind of historical character. Not to bring up the last case, but it gives me some heartache to imagine a car parked there like the neighbor's doing.
And it's almost laid out. If you're looking at the 925 property, it's attempting to extend beyond the front edge of the build condition. So it's almost partially parked behind the building facade as opposed to being 100% in front. Yeah. You made reference to a different item that was done recently? Within a closer time frame than 2011?
We had 6219 and 1717. We're in our historical research. And I believe they're in the staff report.
Okay.
I have found the prior case. It
Thank
was
you.
docket 24510 heard in early 2010.
So I wasn't even here, so I feel better now.
I've kind of briefly scanned it. It looks like part of the proposed front yard parking space for this other property was located behind the front facade, but the majority was in the front yard. And their front yard setback looks like it was 20 feet in depth, so it was a bit deeper than the subject lot that we're considering now.
Okay.
If you have any other questions, let me know.
Commissioner Diaz, if that helps you out. Any other questions from the board? Just one note, I'm just seeing these in the past, and I know that this has been one of those items that's popped up, especially along these stretches where these properties have a more extended front yard condition before you get to the actual property line. And in the past, the way that we've looked at this is, if anything was to be done, the parking was a lot more concealed behind some type of condition as opposed to just having an open-ended driveway scenario. And then other things were done within the site planning process in order to mitigate some of these impacts. So for instance, they're keeping the main walkway, but then still introducing this curb cut in front of the property. So I'm not sure how if they've taken anything to account to look at a different type of scenario or reference other build contexts that may have had where the parking may have been introduced, but then screened in some capacity. Not saying that's what would be necessary to get approved, because I can't speak to that, but just, I think there's more context that needs to be provided as opposed to what's, or at least a different approach than what has been presented.
It's also a substantially shorter kind of parking pad than.
Yeah, what is it?
15 feet, something. 15 and a half feet.
Which also gets into, yeah, you're right, that gets into a lack of compliance as well.
On the sidewalk goes right by, so, you know, depending on the car that's parked there.
Yeah, so we get into the site design standards, and that's generally what we've dealt with in the past. If it's not 18 feet in depth, it's not a compliant parking stall. Or is that referenced incorrectly, looking at the sheet, because it says 15, but then it shows 4'5" behind it? Is that to a reference line, or is the overall depth something different?
The overall, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The overall depth of the proposed parking pad is, I think it's 15.56 feet in depth. But there is additional space between the front property line and the sidewalk. It's a couple of feet.
Right, but then we're granting a parking stall within the public right of way, which we traditionally do not do. So, okay.
Yeah, that's.
Now I see the 15, I'm sorry.
The drawing looks pretty. I mean, the drawing is pretty. It is pretty, right? But I'm looking at it going, oh, the car
Yeah.
fits. And then I'm like, wait, how is it only 15 feet? So that's where it's
That's why.
coming from. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
Can be the bad guy. This one, in regards to docket 7723, I move to deny per the staff's recommendation, citing that the 9 criteria have not been met.
We have a motion on the floor. Second. All right, we have a motion in a second to accept the staff's recommendation for BZA docket number 077-23 and move for denial of the requested waiver. Roll call vote, Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yay.
Commissioner Eggins,
Yes.
and Commissioner James is a yes, and that motion has passed. Next item.
The board may choose to combine BZA dockets 079-23, 080-23, 081-23, 082-23, and 083-23 as they are in conjunction with the same subdivision requests.
All right, so to confirm items 14, through 19.
15 through 19.
See, how we, yeah, see, look at it.
But we went out of
Feedback
order.
because I messed with her.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. So items 15 through 19.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
So I will make that motion to combine dockets 79-23 through 83-23.
Mhm.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor to consolidate BZA docket number 079.
Can I say something before we do that?
Please.
We've gotten in trouble once before when we combined a lot of things together. Is there anything in there that might be unique to one of the properties or another?
They all reference similar requests from table 11-2, whether it's for a rear yard setback, insufficient lot area, insufficient lot depth, or insufficient lot width. However, some of them have 3 out of those 4. 79 has only 1, which I think is for lot width. And BZA 083-23 has, I believe, 4 requests. So they have varying amounts, but they're all requesting similar conditions, as the property is a single parcel with 6 pre-existing dwellings on them. And so the subdivision seeks to separate each lot so that each dwelling is on its own parcel.
So
lot.
I'm gonna say this, just kind of looking through the reports. I mean, we have different conditions. So wait, hold up. Yeah, no, you're right. Not, and we don't want to get in a situation where we have to come back and clean this up later. Let's just keep them separate. I know that we don't necessarily have a large audience of people here on this one either, so just for safety, if we could just keep them separate and just for sake of continuity for the speakers. If you're gonna reflect the same comments for each one, just acknowledge that on each agenda item, and that may help us make this a little bit more expedient.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my motion then.
And I understand where Commissioner Diaz is coming from on this. We had a situation before, and because everyone is not with the same, especially even though they're on the same table, because they are a little bit slightly different, I think it's just for safety. Let's just keep them separate. All right.
The next item is item 15, BZA docket 079-23 for a property at 1969 North Miro Street. This request is for a variance from the provisions of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1, Table 11-2A of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance in conjunction with subdivision docket 167-22 to permit the creation of a lot with insufficient lot width. The applicant is proposing to take a parcel of land that has 6 dwellings on the lot and separate them so that each existing dwelling is on its own lot. With this particular lot, I believe it is lot. I think it's B6, lot B6.
Got it.
This one, they're requesting a variance request for lot width. The requirement for HURD2 is 30 feet. What is proposed is 28.65 feet, a waiver request of 1 foot and 0.35. Staff has researched and pulled data of surrounding parcels. While there are other parcels in the neighborhood that have more than one principal structure on a lot, this case is unique as it has 6 individual lots on one parcel. Additionally, staff has determined that it logically makes sense to separate these parcels in this way, as there's no logical way to create 6 independent lots that meet all of the lot width, lot area, lot depth, and rear yard setback requirements. Therefore, staff is seeking approval of BZA 079-23.
Thank you. Is the applicant present for BZA docket number 079-23?
Yes, good afternoon. Jason Hernandez, 6270 Canal Boulevard, on behalf of Hardship Properties. Again, we want to thank the staff for their work on this one. Times 5 with the 5 different variances or 5 different lots needing the variances on it. The property, there is a buyer who's interested in purchasing the property, and one of the criteria for the lender for the construction loan for it is that they won't lend as it is now with, 6 properties on one lot. So the lender is actually waiting on this approval to be finished, or this approval to be granted and the re-subdivision finished before they can go ahead and ready to close on that for the new buyer to get started on working on the property. Other than that, I'm just here to answer any questions that the board may have as well.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in support of this request? Anyone here to speak in opposition?
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Burns. I live at 2131 St. Anthony Street. I live catty corner away from there. I can actually see the properties from my kitchen window. My main concern about dividing this property lot up is how it is going to affect the property value for my property, being that some of these lots are less than half the size of my own lot. So that's my major concern. And then also too, that they're saying that they want to individually sell these things, but whereas most of the property in my area are owned by LLCs and not by individual homeowners. And also being that this property, this whole lot was bought back in 2022 for nearly $1 million. They're going to have to sell these individual lots for close to $160,000, which is more than my own house costs, which is on a larger house, and my house is also twice the size. So again, being that my property values has already gone up to $1,000, how much is this going to affect my property value with these small lots? Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this request? The applicant has an opportunity to rebut if you choose to.
Yeah, thank you. And again, what his intentions are, whether or not to sell them or to rent them out, but he does want to fix them up. And that's really the main hindrance to getting the loan is just the configuration of the lots. But regardless of what he does with them, keeping or selling them, he does want to repair them and get them in a good condition so that somebody can live there. And I guess as far as the value of the lots, I'm not an appraiser, but I would assume they would take into account the lot sizes of those as to whether or not they would, be used as comparables to other lots that are bigger in that area for that.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board? And just a quick question to staff, because I understand the applicant's intent is, this is sounding more administrative in order to clean up the paperwork, segregating the property so that they're correctly reflecting individual lots of record, right? Yeah. If this was kept as a single lot, is this, I know that it's an existing structure, is that even in accordance with the current zoning to be multiple principal structures?
It is. In HURD2, multiple principal structures are permitted on a lot of record or parcel of record if there's historical evidence of such, and obviously that's what we have here.
Okay, but even in that case, let's say if it was to go into commerce for individual sale, that would then require some form of condominium formation within the property in some capacity, so these would still be sold on an independent basis.
That I'm not sure about, but I believe you are correct.
Okay, all right, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is that for you to appreciate that in either configuration, these still could be sold on an individual basis. They are choosing this mechanism to separate it because of the individual structure standpoint to help clean, because at the end of the day, this is about them having a clean title for an individual piece of property for them to start bringing those properties back into commerce, which I think we all believe is what's probably in the most responsible thing to do at this time, especially with the accessibility to individual homes or any form of home ownership, or bringing these properties back into appropriate scale of commerce. So I just wanted to at least address that for you. We can't really address how property values are necessarily affected on an individual basis. Again, that's something, I'm not a licensed appraiser, or I don't think anybody up here on the board is as well, but just wanted to at least provide some color to your comment. Didn't want you to feel as if though you went unheard. Any other questions from the board?
A motion's in order.
You can proceed.
Regarding docket 079 23. I move to approve the request for a waiver of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1, lot width. Accepting the staff's recommendation for approval and subject to the one noted proviso.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor for BZA docket number 079 23 for the requested waiver of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1, Table 11-2 for lot width. Understand that the 9 criteria have been met and move for approval with the one noted proviso. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yay.
Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Eggins.
Yes.
And Commissioner James is a yes, and that motion is passed. Next item.
The next item is BZA docket number 080 23 for the property at 1977 North Miro Street. Again, this request is in conjunction with the subdivision request to permit the creation of a lot with insufficient lot area, insufficient lot depth, and insufficient rear yard setback. This particular one is lot B4. It is a smaller lot closer to the corner. Same reasons apply for staff's recommendation of approval in that this property is unique in the area as it has 6 individual dwellings on one lot of record, as well as there's no logical way to divide these properties 6 ways and be in compliance with lot area, lot depth, and rear yard setback. As with the case in lot B4, the rear yard setback would cut into the existing structure, which is proposed lot B2. Therefore, staff recommends approval of BZA docket 080 23, subject to one proviso.
All right, if the applicant, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I forgot to mention, yeah, my remarks would be the same for all 5.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in support? Anyone here to speak in opposition?
Do I need to re-identify myself?
Just if you don't mind.
Mary Burns, 2131 St. Anthony Street. I'm concerned about this becoming a precedence because there are other properties around my block on Palger where there are 4 houses on another lot. And I'm just wondering whether or not this is going to be something that I have to watch on because there are many, many properties in the 7th Ward that do have more than just one building on it. I can acquiesce as far as the last one we just did because it's a variance of only like a foot as far as the width of the property. But when we're getting into the 4 on the other side there, then I have issue as far as being that they are so much smaller than the lots. And then the ones on Palger are even smaller than that as far as the walkways between the 2 buildings. And I just think this is something that is going to open up a whole can of worms. Thank you.
Okay. Applicant has the opportunity to rebut if. All right, any questions from the board?
Motion's in order, Mr. Chair. All right, in regards to docket BZA 080-23. I move to approve the request for a waiver of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1. Finding that they have met all 9 criteria following the staff's recommendation and subject to the one noted proviso.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for BZA docket number 080-23. Accepting the staff's recommendation and approving the requested waivers for Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1 for Table 11-2A for lot area, lot depth, and rear yard setback. Understand that the 9 criteria have been met with the approval with the one noted proviso. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yay.
Commissioner Eggins.
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz. Yes. Commissioner Alvarez and Commissioner James is a yes, and that motion has passed as well. Next item.
The next item is BZA docket 81 for a property located at 1981 North Miro Street. This one is for the corner lot, proposed lot B3. The request is for variances from the provision of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1 to permit the creation of a lot of insufficient lot area, insufficient lot depth, and insufficient rear yard setback. As mentioned in the first two cases, staff is recommending approval subject to one proviso, simply because there's no way to cut this lot up so that each dwelling exists on its own lots and abides by the regulations of the comprehensive zoning ordinance.
All right, thank you. And I think the representative stated that his comments reflect the same for this item. And any other speakers in support? And I know we have the speaker in opposition. And I'm gonna assume no rebut on this one as well. Any questions from the board? And I felt like we didn't get a chance to address the last comment with regards to the precedent setting. I understand that question, but again, this gets into what administrative options do exist in order to carve up these properties appropriately. I understand your concern about how the smaller lots are, how those smaller lots may be something that would happen down the road. I think what the difference in a precedent setting is that if we were dealing with vacant land and that was the case, that's a different story as opposed to existing structures and how these lots would be carved up. It does change the approach in terms of how these would be reviewed. So just wanted to provide you with some level of clarity there. If it is existing structures, this is just kind of I hate to say this is the nature of the development pattern and how the code is now catching up to resolve a lot of these buildings in order to appropriately bring them back into commerce. So with that, any other questions or comments from the board?
Ready for a motion?
If a motion's in order.
Chair. In regards to BZA docket 81-23, I move to approve the request for a waiver of Article 11, Section 11.3.A.1, Table 11-2A, a request for waivers for lot area, lot depth, rear yard setback, accepting staff's recommendation for approval with the one noted proviso.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Anybody?
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. For BZA docket number 81-23, accepting the staff's recommendation and moving for approval for the requested waiver of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1, Table 11-2A for lot area, lot depth, and rear yard setback, noting that approval has met the 9 criteria and the one proviso is requested. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yay.
Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Egan.
Yes.
And Commissioner James is a yes, and that motion is approved. Next item.
The next item is BZA 82-23 for a property located at 2206 St. Anthony Street. This particular docket is in reference to the proposed lot B2, which is fronted on the St. Anthony side of the lots. This request is for variances to permit the creation of a lot with insufficient lot area, insufficient lot depth, and insufficient rear yard setback. As mentioned previously, there is no logical way to separate these particular dwellings that would ensure compliance with the current comprehensive zoning ordinance. Therefore, staff is recommending approval subject to one proviso.
And the applicant acknowledged his earlier comments. Anyone in opposition? And so just acknowledging that there was a representative in opposition to this request. And I'm assuming the applicant forgoes the rebuttal. Any questions from the board?
Motion's in order.
Proceed.
In regards to docket BZA 082-23, I move for approval of the request for a waiver of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1, Table 11-2A for lot area, lot depth, and rear yard setback. Accepting staff's recommendation for approval and agreeing that all 9 criteria have been met. And this is with the one noted proviso.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor for BZA docket number 082-23. To accept the staff's recommendation for the requested waivers of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1, Table 11-2A for lot area, lot depth, and rear yard setback, understanding that the 9 criteria have been met, and move for approval with the one noted proviso. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yay.
Commissioner Eggins,
Yes.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
And Commissioner James is a yes, and that motion is passed. Next item.
The next item is BZA docket 083-23 for a property located at 2212 St. Anthony Street. This request is in reference to the proposed lot B1. This particular case is different from the previous 4 that we've heard in that it has an additional waiver. So the variants are requesting from the provisions of Article 11 to create a lot with insufficient lot area, insufficient lot depth, insufficient rear yard setback, and insufficient lot width. Staff finds that there's no logical way to cut this property up so that it complies with all of these requirements of the comprehensive zoning ordinance. Therefore, staff is recommending approval subject to one proviso.
Okay. And the applicant acknowledges his earliest comment and as well as opposition. Thank you. And foregoing rebuttal. Thank you. Any question or what's the pleasure of the board?
If a motion's in order, Mr. Chair.
Proceed.
In regards to BZA docket 083-23, I move to approve the request for a waiver of Article 11, Section 11.3.A.1, Table 11-2A for lot area, lot width, lot depth, and rear yard setback, finding that the applicant has met all 9 criteria, accepting the staff's recommendation for approval, subject to the one noted proviso.
All right, we have a motion on the floor.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for BZA docket number 083-23 for the requested waiver of Article 11, Section 11.3.8.1, Table 11-2A for lot area, lot width, lot depth, and rear yard setback, understanding that the 9 criteria have been met, and the approval has one proviso. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yay.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Eggins.
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
And Commissioner James is a yes, and that motion also passed. Next item.
We will now begin with new business for the Director of Safety and Permits Decision Appeals. The next item is item 20, BZA docket 084-23 for the property at 7608 Simple Street.
And just want to acknowledge that we did read the rules earlier in the day, so those still exist. But just please noting that it is 5 minutes for the representative, up to 15 maximum, and 3 minutes for proponents as well as opposition with a 5-minute rebuttal.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Ashley Becknell. I'm the Chief Zoning Official for the Department of Safety and Permits. Relative to 7608 Simple Street, the applicant's appeal alleges an error in the decision of the Director of the Department of Safety and Permits regarding the issuance of permit number 23-09202-RNVS. Appellant presents 3 bases for her appeal of the department's decision to issue permit number 23-09202-RNVS, and each will be considered here in turn. The department accepted hand-drawn plans rather than requiring stamped plans. The requirement that plans be stamped by an engineer or architect, frequently referred to as stamped plans, is not contained in the CZO. The CZO does require the zoning division to ensure that the submitted plans comply with all bulk and yard requirements. Here, the submitted hand-drawn plans do show that the addition to the property will comply with the required 3-foot setback. Actual compliance is verified by inspection, as with all permits issued by the department. Because this requirement is not contained in the CZO, it does not fall under the jurisdiction of this board. Appeals may be filed concerning any decision of the Director of the Department of Safety and Permits on the following applications of this ordinance. 3, the decision of the Director of the Department of Safety and Permits on permits issued under the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. That's from CZO 4.8B. Number 2, the plans do not comply with the University Area Off-Street Parking IZD adopted by the City Council on 4/6/23. Appellant argues that the plans do not comply with what they refer to as the University Area Off-Street Parking IZD adopted by the City Council on 4/6/23. However, the University Area Off-Street Parking law cited by appellant was not in effect at the time this permit was submitted. Motion M-23-143 attached by appellant was not an interim zoning district or IZD. Rather, this motion approved the City Planning Commission's report and recommendation of modified approval on zoning docket 100/22 and directed the law department to draft an ordinance effectuating the text amendment as approved by the council. No changes to the CZO were made by this motion, and nothing contained therein became legally effective until an ordinance containing the changes recommended by the motion was adopted on May 11th, 2023. And that was ordinance calendar number 34-161. A copy of this ordinance is attached. Therefore, this permit, filed and deemed complete on April 6th, 2023, was governed by the law in place on that date, which was M-22-449, the University Area Off-Street Parking Interim Zoning District, a copy of which is also attached. Under that IZD, bedroom is defined as an enclosed room that cannot be used for any other purpose, such as a kitchen, bathroom, living room, or laundry room. Any room not explicitly labeled as a kitchen, bathroom, living room, or laundry room shall be counted as a bedroom. There is no separate definition for existing bedrooms, and the quoted sections of M-23-143 related to guidance around what a restrictive interpretation is or compliance with the city code related to bedroom size are similarly not contained in M-22-449. The existing or current layout shown on the plans includes a kitchen, a dining room, a living room, an office, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a porch, and a shed. As directed by M-22-449, the department counts this as a living room, as a kitchen, a living room, a bathroom, and 4 bedrooms. 2 rooms labeled as bedrooms, plus the rooms labeled as office and dining. The new layout shows a combined kitchen and living room, a dining room, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a shed. Again, as directed by M-22-449, the department counts this as a kitchen and living room, 2 bathrooms, and 3 bedrooms. Because there is a net loss of 1 bedroom, the department determined that no additional parking would be required. The department does not dispute that this calculation would be different under ordinance calendar number 34-161, but maintains that that ordinance was not yet introduced, much less passed and in effect at the time that this permit was submitted. Number 3, the scope of work and plans submitted are deceptive and vague and constitute a material misrepresentation in the permit application. The department has reviewed the materials submitted by the applicant and found no material misrepresentation. The documents include a detailed contract showing the work to be performed. Given all of this, the department's determination in this matter should be upheld. Thank you.
All right, this is the applicant. Present, thank you.
Before my time starts.
Yes,
I'd
ma'am.
just like to show 2 exhibits. Floor plan of 7608 Zimple at the time of purchase. An office connected to.
Okay, so if you're making a part of your presentation, yeah.
This is I've already started my 5 minutes.
If you're presenting something to try to demonstrate what's the case, then yes, we need to start your
Then I'll
time.
do it while I'm speaking.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to be talking fast. I apologize. My name is Deborah Howell and I live at 1538 Adams Street. Regarding safety and permits BZA appeal summary for 7608 Zimple. DSP's response to item 1 is an example of deliberate sophistry and false argument that despite contrary language on official web pages on NOLA.gov and printed brochures and countless permit application reviews, DSP is now claiming that no professional plans produced by an engineer or architect are not required for structural renovations. How could so many people have been misled about this requirement for so long? Are professional plans required for new constructions anymore, or is everyone now allowed to just wing it with hand-drawn sketches? But this peculiar attitude does explain the department's habit of approving plans that create city code violations, particularly substandard bedrooms. And they have already told us they will not enforce building standards in the city code because these standards are not in the CZO. That is exactly why the new IZD, starting on 4623, included the code's basic dwelling standards in its text with the intent that DSP would have to stop approving permits that violated city code. If the city council did not intend for the amendments to the IZD, which they voted on and passed on 4623, to become effective on that date, rather than have zero effect, why did they go to all the trouble of holding a hearing, soliciting input from constituents, and taking a vote to pass the amended version? I assure you the council's intent was to have the changes become effective on that date, and any permit applications on that date or later were expected to be subject to those amendments. If the only effective IZD existing between 10/6/22 and 5/11/23 was the one that ultimately became printed in the CZO, why then was the 10/6/22 version being enforced at all? And when it was amended on 4/6/23, who told DSP the amended version was irrelevant and meaningless and could be ignored? The owners of 7608 Zimple certainly expected the amended IZD to be enforced on that date, which is why they rushed to submit their permit application on 4/4/23, but chose the wrong permit category and had to resubmit their application on 4/6/23 after all. Regardless, under either the 10/6/22 or the 4/6/23 version of the IZD, this house was clearly being converted from having 2 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms without adding any parking. And literally everyone knows it, including DSP. But ever since the IZD was passed, DSP has engaged in deliberate, repeated misinterpretations of the language, usually by picking and choosing which words and sentences they will deem relevant versus those they deem irrelevant. Section 2CI of the 10/6/22 IZD says, bedroom shall be defined as an enclosed room that cannot be used for any other purpose, such as a kitchen, bathroom, living room, or laundry room. Any room not explicitly labeled as a kitchen, bathroom, living room, or laundry room shall be counted as a bedroom. They usually skip the first sentence and its enclosed room mandate and quote the second sentence, which is what has repeatedly led them to embarrassing absurdities like their insistence that open back porches, stairwells, and hallways are existing bedrooms. And they skipped the enclosed room mandate on 7608 Zimple when they decided they also count the clearly non-enclosed dining room as a bedroom and the office that is clearly no doorway separating from the bedroom. In their zealous determination to aid the developers at any cost, in the case of 7608 Zimple, they decided a tiny 9x5 non-enclosed room connected to the second bedroom was an existing bedrooms for purposes of outsmarting the IZD. And this is probably why they had to come up with their nonsensical excuse that this project fell under the 10/6/22 IZD instead of the 4/6/23 one, because the 4/6/23 IZD required that bedrooms comply with the bedroom requirements as written in the city code, such as a minimum size of 7x10, and they knew it. If this decision is allowed to stand, I guarantee that the owners of this property will finally feel free to advertise it as the $7,200 a month 4-bedroom house into which it has clearly been converted. And safety and permits should be ashamed of themselves for abetting it.
Okay, does that conclude your time? Are you well under the limit? So, no, it's okay. Anyone else here to speak in support of this request? Anyone here to speak in opposition to the appeal?
Hello, I'm in support, of course. Susan Johnson, 2822 LePage Street, Town of Carrollton Watch LLC. In complete support of Ms. Howell's position, and really without getting into those thorny questions about the character of this developer, the history of this developer, yet another dorm developer in our neighborhood taking over our historic houses. My question is, why are, for a structural work permit, structural renovation work permit, why are stamped approved plans not required from a licensed engineer or architect? Or is the point simply that the omission of these plans is not part of this proceeding, should not be counted as a zoning problem. That's my question. I would like an answer. If Ms. Forrest were here, she would say, what questions have not been answered? That's the question I have for you. Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in support of the appeal? Anyone here to speak in opposition to the appeal?
Now, I may sound like a broken record when I repeat everything DSP already said, but good afternoon. My name is Alec Robner, and I am a co-owner of Campus Rentals LLC, a company that strives to embrace the tenants living in our neighborhood while retaining the historic charm of the homes we purchase. To address the appeal directly, I would first like to touch upon the first point in the appeal that refers to, quote, children's drawings being submitted for the plans. Now, other than the tragic insult to my arts and crafts skills, the requirement that plans be stamped by an engineer or architect, frequently already stated before, referred to as stamped plans, is not contained in the CZO, and it does not require the CZO does not require the zoning division to ensure the submitted plans comply with all yard requirements. And here, or if you guys have them, the plans can show you that the property complies with the required 3-foot setback, and the only way you can verify this compliance is through actual inspection, which is, and this requirement is not contained in the CZO. And just to reiterate, this is not a typical doubles to dorm story. There were no camelbacks or second stories added to this property. And for the second mark of the appeal, which deals with the plans not complying with the university IZD adopted by City Council or on 4/6/2023. And the IZD cited by the appellant was actually not in effect at the time the permit was submitted. And the previous IZD was actually in effect at the time when the permit was submitted and considered. And under the previous IZD, a bedroom is defined as an enclosed room that cannot be used for any other purpose. And that room can be labeled as a kitchen, bathroom, living room, or laundry room. And any room not explicitly labeled as kitchen, bathroom, living room, or laundry room shall be counted as a bedroom. There is no separate definition for existing bedrooms. So for the existing bedrooms on the property, as the appellant will actually show you, I guess, in her presentation, there was a kitchen, a dining room, a living room, an office, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a porch, and a shed. And as directed by the previous IZD that the permit fell under, the department counted this as a kitchen, a living room, a bathroom, and 4 bedrooms. So we actually could have gone for 4 bedrooms if we wanted to and intended to. And the new layout shows a combined, for the house, shows a combined kitchen, living room, a dining room, 3 bedrooms, not 4, 2 bathrooms, and a shed. Because there is a net loss of 1 bedroom, no additional off-street parking should be required because we actually removed the bedroom when we could have had 4. For the third and final point of the appeal, which was the scope of work and plans submitted are deceptive and vague and constitute a material misrepresentation of the permit application. The documents we provided when applying for the permit provided, I think, substantial detail about the construction we were going to do. We actually submitted the entire signed budget by me, and we're pretty close to that budget.
All right, that concludes your time. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this appeal? Okay, hearing none. The applicant has an opportunity to rebut. And you do have 5 minutes.
Since don't I have 3 minutes?
5.
Fine. I won't do that, but since the subject of the plans came up, you've probably seen this in the project papers. This is what the applicant submitted for their permit. They labeled a room a dining room, which was clearly a 4th bedroom. As time has passed, they're almost finished with the project. The new plans that take place show clearly 4 enclosed rooms. 1 large, open, living, dining, kitchen. This enclosed room has been alternately called in advertisements for the apartment a dining room, an extra dining room, or an extra study space. And I guarantee, and I would love to ask the owner directly whether they actually do plan to never change their advertisements after this BZA hearing and start calling it a 4-bedroom apartment, which it is. Basically, this is, the whole subject of enclosed versus non-enclosed is the wiggle area that safety and permits has taken ever since the IZD was passed in October of 2022. And nothing that anybody says or does, whether it's Joe Geruso himself who introduced the ordinance, can convince them that an enclosed room mandate is written into the ordinance. And they can't keep calling unenclosed rooms that are pass-through rooms and hallways and stuff, bedrooms only to serve the needs of the developers. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? And I guess my question back to safety and permits, just to get back to the 3 initial questions that were called. The first one, as it pertains to accepting the hand-drawn plans, what is the department's policy on what documents can be received?
The department's policy varies depending on what the authority is underlying that policy. That said, for the zoning division, we are required by law to have plans that show compliance with the rules. The requirement that plans be stamped is, in my understanding, contained in the building code. So that is something that is enforced either by our building division or the permit intake group. It's not something that the zoning division looks at. And therefore, I'm not weighing in on whether stamped plans should or should not have been required. That's really outside of my jurisdiction. I'm just saying that that's not before this board because it's similarly outside of yours.
A rebuttal, excuse me? The rebuttal time, no, I think I've stated the rules earlier and I clearly articulated. She has the opportunity to rebut. That's it. Thank you. I'm just trying to get into, while I understand that there's a zoning side of the equation, theoretically, we're still charged with reviewing decisions made by the department, correct?
That's correct, but the charge is to review the decisions made by the department in the following applications of the CZO. And that's something, we can certainly ask Law to weigh in on more, but the way that we read that, the Department of Safety and Permits on the following applications of the ordinance as 4.8B reads, and it's permits issued under the CZO. So to me, the authority all stems from the CZO and is related to the CZO.
Correct, my apologies. So you're right, just within the standards of review, we are limited as it pertains to the CZO. Mr. Schmidt, I mean, we already passed the window of public speaking.
Something new brought up. The bottom line is.
But we out of order, Mr. Smith, we out of order. We're not gonna do that right now.
Mr. Schmidt, you're not allowed to speak at this time. We don't want to have to ask you.
It's unnecessary, Mr. Smith. I mean, look, we know how to adhere to the rules in terms of what we got within the hearing, so we're just gonna stick to that point. So I'm trying to get clarity, and so I'm gonna come back to legal in terms of the limits of what we're supposed to review, what we do have the ability to review, because there's also within this, I'm looking at our standards of review. So let's get clarity around what are we limited to review upon?
The decisions made by the Director of Safety and Permits.
Mm-hmm.
And are you asking the grounds of this particular appeal, like the things that were stated in her application?
So her application asked the question as it pertained to the building permit. Correct? I see it. So I'm asking the applicant as well.
Yes.
If you gotta come to the mic to respond.
Yes, the issuance of a building permit that didn't fit the requirements as stated in all the press matter and web pages for a building permit.
Okay.
If you can come back and speak to this, you're saying the requirements as required by the CZO, like the CZO not having the need for a stamped?
So let's try this instead, because we're gonna throw more confusion into this conversation. Let's clearly make sure we understand what's the limits of how this board can review or not review an appeal as it pertains to any permit application. Because if I'm reading our standards for review, has the power to hear or decide appeals where it is alleged that there's an error in the order, requirements, decision, or determination by an administrative officer in the enforcement of the comprehensive zoning ordinance, part 1. The board also has the power to hear and determine appeals for applicants who have been refused a building permit or a violation or conflict with the zoning ordinance or the official maps of the city. The applicant's appeal to the Board of Zoning Adjustments is governed by the Home Rule Charter. So I'm trying to get clarity around, is it purely tied to the CZO? Or if a building permit has been issued by the department and any standard or review that's applied to it is still reviewed by this body?
So you're asking whether the confines of the CZO are what limits what the board can review? Like if that's what safety and permits used to make their decisions, we're bound by the limits of the CZO or any extrinsic things that safety and permits used to make their determination. Is that what you're asking?
May Mr. Schmidt speak on this question of yours?
So the public comment time closed.
I think he was
So I have to,
offering to answer a question.
I know that, but here's the problem. The second we start that, I've broken procedure in terms of the public comments, parliamentary rules, how we're handling the public speaking part. And actually wanted to hear what he had to say, unless somebody calls and asks a question in a particular order, but he did not speak on the matter until once we got into a Q&A portion.
Right.
So I'm trying to be careful that I do not trigger something. The next thing, we're dealing with what was appropriate within how we should have reviewed this case.
Well, if it's any consolation, it was very confusing to me, the applicant, to be confronted with this question, which had not come up to my knowledge before.
Mr. Schmidt, it's not appropriate for you to speak.
He's not.
And okay, are you asking whether if the underlying issue is actually a building code issue and not? Okay, yeah, so we have the authority to review it, the confines of the CZO. We're not speaking to building code issues.
What's the venue for someone to appeal? Because I've seen this differently. So I'm asking legal. My conversation's over here.
I can't speak to the appropriate venue at this time for her, but that would be something that maybe she could speak to after the meeting with staff to address the appropriate venue.
Should we defer? Can we defer
You can
for 30 days?
You are justified to request a deferral.
I think this question is important enough to be fully vetted. So I request a deferral for 30 days.
I would say that we don't generally object to first request deferrals in general, so we wouldn't object to this one, but I will also submit that generally building code issues are determined by a separate board, the Board of Building Standards and Appeals.
This is not a building code issue. This is a zoning issue under the IZD.
Well, the premise of what you're using to justify the condition that the plans were submitted and their appropriateness for review was not a CZO question. That's a building code question. Would you concur with that? Because the reference is there, not within the CZO.
There were two different issues. You're right. The IZD issue was separate from the building code issue and the sketches that were submitted, which were very unclear, deliberately so.
Okay. I'm not trying to open up Pandora's box, but at the same time, I mean, a question is being raised and I want to give justification to your question. And the fact of you asking for the 30-day deferral, I think is the appropriate, well, I can't speak to how we would vote, but I think it's a justified request in order for us to get some level of clarity because there is a discrepancy or a moment for pause in terms of what is appropriate or not. Or at least I'd rather get through those check boxes because it is 3 questions and not one thing being questioned, which may apply to 2 different venues.
Right.
Any other questions from the board?
I'll make the motion.
Proceed.
In regards to. We're no longer in variances, we're in decision appeals. Regarding decision appeal BZA 084-23, I'm noting there's no objection from the city. I'd like to accept and move forward with the 30-day deferral for the request of the applicant.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for 30-day deferral and a second. Roll call vote. Bless you. For BZA docket number 084-23, we have a request for a 30-day deferral. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yay.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
Commissioner Eggins.
Yes.
Commissioner James is a yes, and we have a 30-day deferral on this item. Next item.
Item 21, BZA docket 085-23 for the property at 1533 Broadway Street was rendered moot. The next item is item 22, BZA docket 086-23 for the property at 1120 Lower Line Street.
I would like to request a deferral for item number 22 for 30 days as well. We only found out about existing plans for this property on Friday from Safety and Permits. They were not part of the Safety and Permits package. Nobody had ever seen these plans before. Apparently they were emailed to Safety and Permits in April, which was part of an email thread in the package, but no plans were ever made public or attached to the Safety and Permits BZA summary. Therefore, and they're very significant plans. So we would like a 30-day deferral so we have time to review the details of these plans.
Okay. City.
As I stated before, we don't object to first requests for deferral.
Okay. All right, it's both city and the applicant is both noted a request for a 30-day deferral. It's the pleasure of the board. Well, I'm sorry, I should have asked for any speakers. Is there anyone else here to speak in support of the appeal?
Justin Schmidt, 1506 7th Street, representing Mr. and Mrs. Linton Guy Cook at 1120 Lower Line. They are the across the street neighbors who have witnessed all the materials going into this house and all the things that have been done. We support the request for the deferral. And also, Madam City Attorney, Assistant City Attorney, if you could, while you're checking up on the other thing with respect to what the venue, the purview of this board is when it sits in an appeal, there's revised statutes as well as what's in the rules and regulations of the Board of Zoning Adjustments that clearly states any decision of the director, which is the issuance of a permit, well established anyway. Miss in her position paper, Ms. Becknell suggests that zoning violations die when the property is transferred to a new owner. That is patently wrong. I know that because HDLC consistently files complaints and cites property owners who have purchased properties that have been renovated incorrectly. And I'm in fact litigating some of those in CDC right now on behalf of the new property owner who got stuck with $10,000 and $15,000 tabs to correct the property, to remediate the property to the correct standards that the previous property owner, the seller, had incurred. So that's just simply not true. So please look into that and make sure that Ms. Becknell stands corrected on the fact that zoning violations are in rem, meaning they run with the property and not the owner of the property. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here to speak in support of the appeal?
Susan Johnson, 2822 LePage Street, Town of Carrollton Watch. I am not paid to be here. Yes, please defer. I am in support of the appeal. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else here in support of the appeal? Anyone here to speak in opposition to the appeal?
Hi, everybody. How's it going? My name is Sam Torres. I'm the owner of 1120 Lower Line, and I would like to dismiss the fact of deferring 30 days. We bought this house about 6 months ago. When I looked at the complaint, basically stated that we are not in compliance with parking. This house, only thing that had been done to it is a renovation, and is substantially less than a normal renovation. We've only done cosmetic work, and upon doing more, we did have one request of replacing the panel. We bought this house as it is, and we have not done any continuing additions. We've had multiple neighbors come around us just because we've been doing work, but at the end of the day, we bought it as it is, and we've had multiple city inspections come through, taking pictures to check and see if we did extensive work, which they have proved that we haven't. So that's the end of it. So thank you very much, and I appreciate y'all's time.
All right, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this request?
Yes, my name is Greg Richardson. I also represent the owners of 1120 Lower Line. Just to clarify what Sam just stated, at the end of the day, the bedroom count of this home did not change from the time that it was purchased as well. There was a floor plan submitted with from the MLS listing during the sale. That's on file with the city, and I believe it is also part of public record. The new floor plan has not changed, and it has been toured a minimum of 6 times by safety and permits or code enforcement to confirm that, as recently as even last week, to confirm that no bedroom count has changed, that the only work that took place inside the home was strictly cosmetic. So the IZD rule, and also to clarify, the overall value of this project was just cosmetic work. The only change was an electrical panel partway through the project that the electrician realized should be replaced, and we submitted a change order for that. That still kept the overall value substantially less than a substantial remodel. And at the end of the day, no bedroom count has changed at all. It's just physically a prettier house. The complaints seem to be coming in every time a truck pulls up for workers to do work inside. However, the footprint of the house has not changed, nor has the bedroom count. That's all. And one other housekeeping item, the previous item on the docket, 1533, was that actually just closed out as being moot, or was that deferred for 30 days?
I'll let you talk to staff on a side.
Okay, because I believe that you called for comments on it, and then the next comment immediately jumped to Lower Line.
So like I mentioned, sidebar, check with legal or check with staff as it pertains to that item.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We didn't take any action on that item. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to the appeal? Any questions from the board? Well, I'm sorry, opportunity for rebut, but I think there was already a 30-day request for deferral. Any questions from the board?
If the motion's in order,
Proceed.
regarding docket 086-23. I move to defer the matter 30 days at the request of the applicant, noting that the city has no objection to the deferral.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor for a 30-day deferral. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yay.
Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Commissioner Eggins,
Yes.
and Commissioner James, and that motion has moved. Next item,
Would the board consider a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
all right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Roll call vote, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yay.
Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Alvarez.
Yes.
Eggins. And
Yes.
Commissioner James is a yes, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.